Chapter 922. In the huge and spacious Yuji Hall, Hutu's supreme master was sitting in silence. A man was kneeling below the Yuji Hall. All the eunuchs and attendants had left the hall. Everyone was silent. The royal palace was filled with a strange atmosphere. The royal palace was the place where news spread the fastest in the world, and it was also the place where the most dangerous news spread in the world. In the vast royal palace, there was a dense intelligence network. Almost every famous eunuch and palace maid had friends from the outside world. The wise ministers would choose to build a good relationship with the eunuchs in the royal palace. At the critical moment, a little information leaked from the royal palace could determine the lives of hundreds and thousands of people. However, today's news was too dangerous. The Shinsei general, Sun Lang. Before today, many people knew nothing about the name Sun Lang. But if they knew that Sun Lang was Jia Ying back then, many people would be surprised. The eunuchs were not interested in the reason for the name change, the story behind it, and all kinds of inside information. They only knew that the world was about to change, and the emperor had suffered a loss because of a minister. Even Empress Tensei, who was favored by the emperor and in charge of the army, was punished to kneel in the hall. What did it mean? Even many experienced eunuchs didn't dare to think too much about it. In the hall, Empress Tensei knelt in silence. She felt that there was a layer of horrible dark clouds above her head, and the real pressure fell on her soul inch by inch. This was the power of the imperial power. This was the power of the imperial power. This was the power of the imperial power. This was what she had been pursuing. But now, it made her feel scared, because her performance today was terrible. He fled in the face of the battle, in front of everyone. But the monk could run away, but the temple couldn't. The child who made trouble had to go home to be scolded, because she couldn't run away from home. She was thinking about her father's property, a lot of that kind of property. Sweat dripped from her smooth cheeks and dripped onto the ground, making a light patter. She felt that time was passing very slowly. This was an illusion in her heart, because she was under pressure. She had not felt this kind of tension for a long time. The tension of having her fate controlled by someone else was something that no one with a desire for control could tolerate. She wanted to get rid of it, but it was easier said than done. In this world, only one person could get rid of it and stand above all others forever. That was her goal, to become the empress, to control her own fate and the fate of countless people. No, wait a minute. Maybe more than one person can get rid of it. There was another person. That person's appearance appeared in her mind, and she didn't need to recall it at all. Even if it had been 2 years, even if she thought that he had died from his injuries, she couldn't forget this person in her heart. She couldn't forget what he looked like. Cutting off the fate with him was a farewell to her weak past self. However, the fate wasn't cut off, but it became an ill-fated fate. Not only did that person come back, but he also became her nightmare. He could even get rid of her father's control and stand on equal footing with the supreme monarch. 8 years ago, he was just an insignificant ant. His body was weak, his will was weak, and his personality was weak. It was as if he lived in a paradise and hadn't been baptized by blood and death. But now he could proudly stand in the imperial court and smile at the monarch. He wasn't afraid of becoming an enemy of a country. Looking back on the past, things remained the same, but people had changed. Fate played tricks on people. It was so bizarre that it was unbelievable. She saw Sun Lang come to this world with her own eyes. She saw him change little by little, grow up little by little, and finally become what he was now. The most ironic thing was that it was the Empire that made him like this. The Empire forced him to fight for the world, so he grew from a weak ant into a famous general. It was the Empire that wanted to eliminate him, but he survived and broke through the limits of martial arts to become a terrifying monster who could single-handedly take on an entire country. He was well versed in the art of war and understood the Empire's military system. These were all taught to him by the Empire. With this wisdom, experience, and talent, coupled with his peerless martial prowess, he could roam the world and destroy the basic administrative system of an entire country. He could poison, set fire, assassinate, mislead, and cause the government to collapse and the army to scatter. He could raise his arm and call for reinforcements. He could single-handedly destroy the invincible Hutu Empire. This was originally a very funny joke, but now, the joke had almost become reality. A mere person actually had the power to destroy an entire country. In Mingzhou, Sun Lang had once questioned her. He said that the empire had made him who he was, that it was the empire that had made him who he was, that was the empire's choice that had put the empire in danger. He said that this was retribution, that it was the heavenly Tao's reincarnation. Her attitude was extremely firm, saying that this was a coincidence among coincidences. But now, her heart actually began to waver. Perhaps it was because what had happened before had shaken her heart's defenses. She once again experienced the powerlessness and helplessness of being a woman. It was truly a strange feeling. Just like now, she was helpless and powerless, unable to decide her own fate. Just as she was letting her imagination run wild, a calm voice rang out. "Why are you running? It's here." Her heart thumped heavily, and her hands clenched tightly. Empress slowly lowered her head until it was completely pressed against the floor. "This son has committed a capital crime." The emperor's voice was still devoid of emotion. He leisurely said, "Why are you running?" General Tensei's heart suddenly clenched. She had to get through this trial, she thought. She had to explain clearly, but she couldn't say it directly. She couldn't let Imperial Father know of that matter. She couldn't let Imperial Father know of Sun Lang's ability. She couldn't let Imperial Father know that she was completely unable to deal with Sun Lang. She couldn't let Imperial Father know that she was useless in this matter. Prince Zhongshuan's whispers and cold laughter echoed in her mind. She gritted her teeth and slowly said, this son is afraid." "Oh," the emperor asked, "what are you afraid of?" Since she had already made her choice, given Empress's personality, she naturally let go and threw caution to the wind. She did her best to restrain her emotions and make her voice sound calmer. "This son is afraid of Sun Lang's poisonous scheme. This is a way to drive a wedge between us and also a way to attack this son. Once he uses this scheme to force Imperial Father to agree to this marriage, this son will die without a burial place and forever lose the chance to inherit the throne." Sun Lang had once told her that a soldier who didn't want to be a general wasn't a good soldier, and a prince who didn't want to be an emperor wasn't a good prince. Therefore, empress who didn't want to be an emperor wasn't a good empress. In front of Imperial Father, she wouldn't hide her desire for the position of crown prince. She wouldn't hide it. She would speak frankly about her ambitions and strive hard to obtain Imperial Father's trust and love. So this time, she had to tell the truth. But it was a half-truth. The emperor said faintly, "Can you still escape every time?" This small hurdle had been passed. Empress was slightly relieved, but she didn't dare to relax completely. She continued, "It's not the same. This time, I ran away in a panic. It even seemed like I ran away out of shyness. This will change the focus of the matter from whether Imperial Father will grant the marriage to whether I agree or not. This will make Sun Lang's method of forcing the emperor to abdicate the throne completely useless, so as not to make things difficult for Imperial Father." The emperor snorted. "You're still planning for me?" "I don't dare." Empress said frankly. "I'm thinking more for myself." The emperor said faintly, "But you still ran away and left me there." All the civil and military officials in the court didn't say anything. They were all laughing at me. They were never on the same side as us. 2 years ago, they were all afraid of the Great Barren Mountain. They were afraid that they would become the next Sun Lang. Humph, they don't deserve it. Empress kowtowed again and said, "I'm guilty of the death penalty. You're my daughter. Although I'm angry, I can still forgive you. After all, Sun Lang is very powerful. It was extremely difficult for me to withstand him, so I won't blame you." The emperor looked at his daughter. His eyes flashed with a strange light. That young body, that body full of vitality. Among his children, she was the most like him and the most suitable. So, he chose her. This beautiful body would become the possibility for him to live forever. Suppressing the stirring desire in his heart, he said calmly, "Sure, what I mean is, in the face of a great enemy, the foreign officials cannot be trusted. Only when the people of the Li family are united can we sweep away the disaster Sun Lang. Empress said in a low voice, "Yes, I'm willing to sacrifice my life for Imperial Father." Sacrifice your life? There's no need. The Emperor looked meaningfully at his daughter. A strange smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Even he himself did not notice. Perhaps it was because the time was approaching, or perhaps the time was gradually maturing, but when he looked at his daughter now, his attitude was gradually changing. His tone had unknowingly become gentler. "But I do need you to do something for me," he said slowly, considering his tone. "Perhaps it's a little sacrifice." The Empress concubine's heart clenched. She could even clearly feel her own heartbeat. In an instant, the heavens and earth faded away as the words of the king of Zhongshuan echoed in her mind. That was Sun Lang's whisper. "I need you to feign civility with Sun Lang. Pretend to be perfunctory with him, divert his attention, and create trouble for him. I need you to face him directly and not run away like you did today. If necessary, I also hope that you can pretend to agree to this marriage." The Emperor said slowly, "Do you agree?" So, as expected, Sun Lang was completely right. This meant that he had long predicted her father's actions. In that instant, the Emperor's concubine felt her mouth go dry. She was thinking if she should tell her father about this matter, Prince Zhongshan's message, and Sun Lang's whispers. She wanted him to know that Sun Lang was even harder to deal with than she had imagined. She wanted him to be 120% focused. But for some reason, she hesitated. Chapter 923. Since ancient times, accompanying a monarch was like accompanying a tiger. At this moment, Empress's heart was in her throat. People had an emotion called a guilty conscience. When a person was guilty, she would be particularly sensitive and uneasy to the point of worrying about gains and losses. When she heard His Majesty's suggestion, Admiral Tensei's mind had already turned over a dozen thoughts. Should she tell the truth about what King Zhongshuan had told her, or hide the truth and tell a big lie? She couldn't make up her mind because the implications of this matter were too wide. More importantly, she was not so selfless, loyal and devoted, willing to be at the forefront of her father, and even following the Emperor's orders to eliminate Commander of War, who had already posed a great potential threat to national security, Jia Ying. The various things she had done did not stem from unconditional loyalty. Her loyalty was conditional. Everything she had done was to please the Emperor so that she could receive the Emperor's favor and be bestowed the position of Crown Prince. That was all. At the end of the day, this was just a deal, a tacit deal. She had selfish motives. So every action had to be considered the gains and losses as well as the consequences. Telling the Emperor everything that Prince Zhongshan had told him before, reminding the Emperor that this was all part of Sun Lang's plan, would certainly please the Emperor. But then what? If the Emperor pursued the truth, then more and more secrets would be exposed. He would eventually know that Sun Lang had some kind of unbelievably lowly ability, which was enough to allow him to maintain an overwhelming advantage in the confrontation with Empress Tensei. So he would think that Her Highness Empress was no longer able to shoulder the heavy responsibility of fighting against Sun Lang. And now, the Emperor's top priority was to suppress and deal with the returning Sun Lang. If she cannot play the role she should, then he would find someone better. This was obvious, and a new candidate might be some ambitious prince. Her brothers were not easy to deal with. They would certainly seize this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to overtake her. This meant that she would be at least one step behind in the battle for the position of Crown Prince. It was simply 100 harms with no benefits. Yes, almost no benefits. What? If you tell His Majesty the truth honestly, will His Majesty be pleased and directly give you the position of Crown Prince? Whoa, wake up. The position of Crown Prince was all about ability, merit, and temperament. Who the F***CK cares if you're honest or not, or if you're simple or not? In that case, the choice was obvious. Empress chose not to say anything. In her mind, the image of King Zhongshuan sneering appeared once more, filled with malice and mockery. No, it wasn't King Zhongshuan sneering. It was clearly Sun Lang sneering. That good-for-nothing 14th brother of hers had already become a pitiful puppet, a lunatic identical to Sun Lang. But things weren't over yet. Empress's heart hardened again. She calmly said, "Following Imperial Father's orders, I am willing to go through water and tread on fire to eradicate that evil thief for you." The Emperor seemed to be stunned for a moment. After a pause, he said, "Good. I am very comforted." He seemed to be weighing his words, perhaps to comfort his daughter's heart. After all, the Emperor was the most realistic creature in the world. He knew where Empress's loyalty came from. His most excellent daughter was willing to be the Emperor's vanguard only for the throne. But what was wrong with that? Therefore, he said, "I know what you are worried about. You don't have to worry. I am your shield. I will remove your worries. Now that we are facing a great enemy, we must unite as a family. Only then can we eradicate this mistake, eradicate this evil thief. I promise you that what belongs to you will always be yours." Hearing this, Empress seemed slightly moved. She kowtowed again and said, "Thank you for your grace, Imperial Father." But she laughed coldly in her heart. What promise? In the end, the position of Crown Prince still had to be fought for by oneself. The father and daughter talked for a while, exchanging some thoughts and opinions. Then Empress took her leave. Looking at his daughter's heroic and graceful figure disappearing outside the door of the palace, the Emperor, sitting on the throne, had a strange expression. His eyes flashed with a strange light. There was desire and reason. It seemed that there were two opposing thoughts fighting in his mind. After a long time, he slowly exhaled and whispered, "She? How could she agree so easily?" He was not talking to himself, because in the next moment, a powerful will descended and responded to his whisper, "You are too suspicious. Besides, is this important?" The Emperor suddenly laughed. "Yes, it is not important. What she thinks is not important at all." The voice asked again, "What does the taste of failure taste?" The Emperor did not answer this question. He has already mastered the sacred sword of fire, just as you planned. Although there are many variables in the process, it is the result we want. Then we can start the next step of the plan. The voice said calmly, "I let him escape once, but I will not give him a second chance." The Emperor nodded. But even if he was the Emperor, he was still mortal. The continuous failure in the past 2 days, the grievance, resentment, and helplessness in the Imperial Ancestral Temple. This series of setbacks was enough to shake a person's heart. His tone was a little dazed. "How confident are you?" 100%. The voice replied, "Just like 2 years ago, the knife will stab in places he can't imagine." He thought he could raise his arm and gather followers. He thought he could use the conflict between the power of the officials and the monarch to steal the position of the leader of the officials to suppress you. But he seems to have forgotten one thing. The ancient will said faintly, "You are not the only one who desires immortality. Many people have it." He thought he had many friends, but is it really so? The Emperor slowly nodded, but the word immortality also stimulated him. He subconsciously looked up at the door of the palace, but the beautiful and young figure had already left. The figure of his daughter appeared in his mind. She was full of vigor and vitality, young and lively. She was about to become the continuation of his life and become the first step to immortality. Sure, he quietly clenched his fists like a demon thirsting for blood and swallowed a mouthful of saliva. "How much longer?" he asked in a low voice, not noticing the tremor in his voice. The ancient will gently replied, "Wait a little longer. Wait a little longer." Empress, who had left the Yuji palace, shivered in the cold morning wind. Her body gradually warmed up. The performance in the Yuji hall was not long, but it was extremely unbearable for her. After she came out, she realized that her back was already drenched in sweat. It was slippery and uncomfortable, but what was even more uncomfortable was undoubtedly the sense of powerlessness and defeat in her heart. Sun Lang had caused a ruckus in Tensei Province the day before yesterday. Today, in front of the Imperial Ancestral Temple, he had threatened and held back. King Zhongshan, who had been waiting for an opportunity, the Emperor's questions and suggestions, everything was arranged by Sun Lang. Everything was in the control of that person. He seemed to be watching everything. Even the proud empress had to admit that she was now being played in the palm of Sun Lang's hand. He could have made her lose face in front of the imperial ancestral temple. But unexpectedly, he showed mercy. Combined with what had just happened, this bastard clearly had a more far-reaching plan and conspiracy. What else did he know? What else was there that he didn't know? Empress was full of doubts and uneasiness. But for her, the most important thing was not to get to the bottom of this, but to deal with the next challenge. Sun Lang's despicable ability was like a sharp sword hanging over her head, making her feel as if she was sitting on pins and needles. She was always under the threat of Sun Lang. She had to solve this problem. Otherwise, her father would find out sooner or later. Then, how should she solve this problem? Empress strolled slowly in the vast imperial city, frowning in deep thought. When the attendants and eunuchs in the palace saw her from afar, they quietly avoided her. Usually, they would show 300% of their enthusiasm to curry favor with this Tensei general with boundless prospects, but today was different. They were well-informed and had already heard some rumors. But this was also good. Empress was also happy to have some peace and quiet. She frowned in deep thought. Sun Lang's martial arts were simply too strong to be countered. This was the most troublesome part. With his martial arts, there was no woman in the world that he could not touch. No matter how careful the defense was, it would be useless. Could a full set of heavy armor block him? She was afraid that the effect would be extremely limited. Heavy armor could not block the skillful power of hitting a cow through a mountain. Sun Lang's ability was clearly some kind of strange and evil obscenity that could not be defended against at all. So, she could not think about static defense. There was no way to defend. In terms of military strategy, in such a situation, she could only attack. Attack? How to attack? General Tensei recalled everything about that strange and evil obscenity, starting from the time in Mingzhou. She recalled what Sun Lang had said, Sun Lang's reaction, Sun Lang's performance, and, wait a minute, the memories of that day continued to emerge. Time turned back, and the needle of her memory moved to that night. That night, Sun Lang confidently gathered his new and old loves together, trying to control the situation with the theory of letting everyone obtain happiness that he had always preached in his early years. But he screwed up, so in a panic, he directly kidnapped Empress and fled in the direction of Qinzhou. He wanted the gold luminary sacred sword. Empress suddenly came to a realization, and then she almost stomped her feet in regret. Sun Lang seemed to be unable to actively control his despicable ability, so he had to find a sacred sword to suppress that ability. But soon she calmed down. Because Sun Lang had already obtained the sacred sword, didn't this mean that he had already found a solution? If this was really the case, then the matter was completely unsolvable. An obscenity that could be freely controlled was undoubtedly the nightmare of all women in the world. But if that was not the case, if Sun Lang was still unable to control that despicable ability, then things would become very easy. Thinking of Sun Lang's despicable face before, thinking of Sun Lang's repulsive face before, Empress revealed a Sun-Ran sneer. Sun Lang, didn't you want to touch women? I'll let you touch as much as you want. Chapter 924. There was a period of time when Empress and Sun Lang were very close. They used to be friends who talked about everything. They used to be good teachers who taught each other and improved each other. They learned from each other and influenced each other. The thoughts of the two worlds had a short but deep integration. Sun Lang learned the importance of tactics and decisiveness from Empress. Under the influence of the current princess, he completed a change in his thinking and mentality and improved his structure and vision. As for the Empress concubine, she learned even more things from Sun Lang. Those messy stories, those bold and unconstrained ideas, those unconventional ways of thinking greatly improved the Empress concubine's posture. In other words, the noble princess of the empire had been led astray by Sun Lang. Just as when it came to the fair and square struggle in the imperial court, Sun Lang could also plan and strategize like an orthodox minister. When Her Highness Empress wanted to do something dirty, her imagination and moral integrity should not be underestimated. Just like now, Empress was obviously ready to do something dirty. Just like the day when she went north as an imperial envoy and was robbed by Sun Lang. After suffering a big loss, Empress Tensei immediately called Xue Baochai and Lin Daiyu over and arranged a vicious plan. Sun Lang was careless and stepped into the abyss of Azura and was directly caught in the act. This was undoubtedly Her Highness Empress's proud work. If she was not caught by the angry Sun Lang later, it could be called a great victory. And now, she was ready to let go of herself again. Because the opponent was an exceptional enemy, a bitch who could not be judged by common sense. Not to mention other things. Which minister would do such a thing in the imperial ancestral temple in the thousands of years of history? An extraordinary enemy should be dealt with in an extraordinary way. Since Sun Lang used such a disgusting and despicable way to bully others, she would give him a taste of his own medicine. Bastard, you forced me to do this. With Senrin's cold smile, His Highness Empress left the imperial city with a murderous look. Of course, the moment she was about to step out of the palace gate, she quickly recovered from her cold and stern state. She slowly poked her head out of the palace gate and looked left and right. If that bastard Sun Lang was blocking her outside and she was met with a burial order or something, then this matter would be too troublesome. What made her heave a sigh of relief was that Sun Lang wasn't standing guard outside. The ones who were waiting outside were a group of officials from the Heavenly Policy Mansion. They were her companions, her subordinates, her helpers. They were fellow soldiers that she could trust and rely on. Their honor and lives were linked together. The people who came to greet her were her core aides and civil and military officials. Everyone was very happy to see Her Highness come out unscathed. After they finished greeting each other, they all boarded General Tensei's luxurious carriage. After sitting down, Wei Zheng asked, "Your Highness, are you all right?" Empress nodded slowly. "I'm fine. Father only asked and reprimanded me a little. After all, under such circumstances, I had no choice but to do this." Qin Xiong lowered his head and said, "It's our incompetence that caused Your Highness to suffer such humiliation." Empress said calmly, "It's not that Xu Bao is incompetent. It's that Sun Lang is too cunning." Now, the people beside her were old brothers who had walked through Blade Mountain Flame Sea Guild together. They were completely trustworthy. Therefore, there was no need to boost their morale. She only needed to give orders. Her Highness Empress's gaze swept across everyone's faces and stopped at Zhongsun Wuji, assistant. Zhongsun Wuji hurriedly said, "Yes, Your Highness." General Tensei hesitated for a moment, but still said, "I have a mission for you. If Your Highness has any orders, Wuji dares to disobey?" Zhongsun Wuji immediately responded. At the same time, his heart was thumping. Previously, in the Imperial Ancestral Temple, he thought of Sun Lang's questioning of him. Although those words were extremely vulgar, it still left some ripples in his heart. Her Highness Empress was a genius and peerless beauty. Of course, he admired her. At this moment, he regretted that he already had a wife. Otherwise, some delusions were born in his mind. In the past, he didn't even dare to think about it. Now, the situation had changed a little. Just now, in the Imperial Ancestral Temple, Sun Lang used a vicious scheme and actually proposed to Her Highness Empress in front of everyone. This move was extremely sinister. If His Majesty really granted a marriage and Tensei and Shinsei were to be married, then Her Highness would probably have nothing to do with the Emperor's plans for hegemony forever. The other princes would definitely jump for joy. And if Her Highness Empress wanted to resolve this move, the simplest way was to announce the marriage. Even if it was just a fake marriage contract, it could still shut Sun Lang's mouth from human relations. However, Sun Lang seemed to have expected this move. With his insane speech and shocking actions, he announced that nothing could stop him. His attitude was very simple. Whoever dared to have any ideas about Empress, he would wear a mask and break that person's little hooks at night. Whoever dared to stop him would be kicked together. Thousands of courtiers outside the imperial ancestral temple had heard this bastard's threats with their own ears. Moreover, from his various daring actions in the past 2 days, no one would suspect that he was joking. In summary, it was estimated that no one would dare to take up this offer. Even the most powerful and prestigious families wouldn't be willing to offend a powerful and unscrupulous crazy general for no reason and become the cannon fodder used by the royal family to fight against someone. It was really not worth it. But Zhang Sun Wuji secretly glanced at Empress. I'm willing, even if it's fake, even if it's just an act, even if I have to face Sun Lang's vicious revenge and endless attacks, I'm willing to endure it. He said in a daze in his heart, if this is what Her Highness wants me to do, then I'm willing to die. At this moment, Empress's words sounded in his ears. This is a very important matter. You have to arrange it yourself. It's best to use the power of your family and do it in your name. Don't involve Tensei province. What is it? What is it? Is it really? Zhang Sun Wuji's heart thumped wildly. Send someone to the streets and countryside to find some foolish shrews. I'm willing. Student Zhang Sun Wuji thought that he was hallucinating and raised his head in surprise. The other core members of Tensei province also looked at Her Highness Empress in surprise. What is this? Her Highness Empress looked calm. If I ask you to do it, then do it. Can't you do it? Zhang Sun Wuji couldn't figure it out, but he could only nod. The Heavenly Policy Residence was a military residence, and the Heavenly Strategies General was everyone's general. The military camp's orders were strictly enforced, and there was no questioning. But he still asked, General, do you have any requests? Her Highness Empress sneered. The uglier the better, the more crooked the better, the fatter the better, the rougher the better, the more the better, and the more disgusting the better. Do you understand? Student Zhang Sun Wuji nodded silently. Empress ignored the complicated expressions of the people present and turned to look at Yuan Shiji, Sima. Yuan Shiji shuddered, and a look of horror appeared on his face. You're looking for someone who can shock the heavens and make ghosts and gods weep? Can't you find someone else? General Tensei said with a pleasant expression, Brother Renren's family is well learned, and you're from a prominent family in the imperial capital. You must be well informed. I want you to go back and ask your family members to make a list. Yuan Shiji was slightly relieved, but he was still vigilant. A list? Yes, Empress said in a relaxed tone. The 6 ministers, the important ministers of the 3 provinces, the martial arts hall, the famous generals, the aristocratic families, and the famous masters. As long as you're famous in the imperial capital and have a good daughter, whether married or not, as long as she's talented, beautiful, and loved by her parents, you can list her on the list. Sort out her family situation and personal characteristics. I want to see. Student Zhang Sun Wuji looked at Yuan Shiji with a complicated expression. Minister Sima Yuan of Tensei province avoided Zhang Sun Wuji's gaze and said with a puzzled expression, General, forgive me for speaking bluntly, but do you have any plans? Empress Tensei smiled slightly. I have some ideas, but they're not mature yet, so I can't tell you now. You'll understand in the future. As for the task I've entrusted to you, please pay more attention to it. What plans? His Highness Empress sneered coldly in his heart. Of course, he wanted to let Sun Lang have his fill at once. You want me to lose my composure in public? I'll first label you as a pervert so that you can't clear your name. You want to marry me? I'll first find you some young ladies from prestigious families to let you have your fill for free. You want Father Emperor to be your father-in-law? I'll first find you a group of cheap fathers-in-law. Don't you want to start a harem? Don't you want to spread your seed all over the world? I'll let you have a taste of having a whole city full of fathers-in-law. This was an extremely dirty and sinister plan. He wanted to use this method to completely destroy Sun Lang's life in society. This was a plan specially prepared to deal with a bastard like Sun Lang. For this reason, the Heavenly Strategies General, who was peerless in his generation and had outstanding military achievements, had cast aside his moral integrity and pretentiousness as an important official of the imperial court. It was because if he did not do this, he would not be able to defeat a bastard like Sun Lang. Good people also had to learn to protect themselves. They had to use the methods of evil people to fight back against evil people. Of course, these words and these things couldn't be said to his comrades and officials. The empress concubine gritted her teeth in anticipation. But all these plans had a common premise, and that was that Sun Lang still couldn't control his perverted ability. Otherwise, everything would be empty talk. He had to find a chance to investigate and verify it. Empress thought about how to investigate and gather evidence. At this moment, Wei Zheng said, "The imperial court will definitely send someone to investigate Qi Lianyan's death. We've already discussed it before, and His Majesty will most likely use the capital governor, Bao Haizi, as an excuse to deal with it. In order to make sure that he doesn't have enough power, he will most likely summon the 4 great constables." "Your Highness, do you still remember?" General Tensei's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" Wei Zheng said slowly. "This morning, we received news that the head of the 4 great constables, Miss Kanan, and her brother Kaboan appeared outside by castle to observe the sword scar left by Sun Lang." Empress was taken aback at first, but then a great surprise appeared in his heart. "I have a candidate." Chapter 925. There was indeed a candidate. Empress's spirit was lifted. The eldest daughter of the Ko clan, Wu Ho's first disciple, along with Bing County's Di Huaying, Nanping County's Song Huifu, and Lu County's Bao Shiren, were known as the 6 fan school's 4 famous hunters. Although she was a woman, she was the leader of the 4 famous arresters. Her qinggong was the best in the world, and her hidden weapon skills were rarely matched. She was also the trump card of the female Kuju team in the imperial capital. Together with Gao Qiu of the White Tiger Hall, they were known as the 2 national teams of Hutu. Their fame was known throughout the imperial capital, and their fans were everywhere. Her fans were everywhere. This was normal. Think about it. As a celebrity policewoman, her teacher had a great reputation, her professional qualities were excellent, and she had solved countless cases. In addition, she was also a F***ing Miss Soccer star. Most importantly, she was super good looking. This kind of all-rounder, big-breasted, and brainy beauty could attract a lot of fans. She had even evolved the Kuju technique into a set of martial arts. When facing an enemy, she would use whatever she could find. Stones, wood, bricks, weapons. As long as it could be kicked up, it would become her weapon. With her lightness skills that allowed her to step on snow without leaving a trace, her powerful leg techniques, and her exquisite hidden weapon techniques, this set of Kuju martial arts was simply tailor-made for her. It was said that when eldest Miss Ku fought with her enemies, rocks and sand would fly all over the battlefield. All kinds of hard objects would scatter all over the sky, and the wind would howl. Among the dirt and gravel, there were also flying needles that were as thin as a cow's hair and would fall asleep at the sight of blood. They came and went unpredictably, and it was impossible to guard against them. Moreover, eldest Miss Ku, who was skilled in lightness skill, was used to jumping high in the air and shooting arrows. Over time, this chief arrester of the 4 famous arresters gained a terrifying nickname, Tyrannical Sky Tiger. But this was already a thing of the past. In recent years, there had been no news of Tyrannical Sky Tiger Ku, Nan in Jianghu, or the imperial court. Time flew by, and things remained the same, but people changed. The famous arresters of that year all had their own futures. Di Huaying was already a senior official in the Supreme Court. Song Huifu was a 4th-rank enforcer before he resigned, and Bao Shiren was a high official in the capital. He was one of the 3 assistants, and all of them were inspirational examples that the 6 fan school arresters talked about. However, there was no news of Kanan, the most capable and famous of the 4 famous hunters, and her whereabouts were unknown to the world. There were many rumors in Jianghu. Some said that she had found her Mr. Right and lived in seclusion from the world. Some said that she had failed while investigating a big case, and her soul had gone to the underworld. Some even said that super arrester Ku had offended a big shot and fell into a despicable trap. She had been turned into a sow during a secret investigation. These guesses were just the dark delusions of ordinary mortals. The real reason was something else. As a Tensei general, Empress had a high position and was well informed. Naturally, he knew the inside story. Back then, the leader of the four great hunters had made a mistake while practicing the eternal spring technique, injuring the Shaoyang meridian in her hand. The eternal spring Jinqi backfired on her, causing her bones to shrink and her blood to flow backwards overnight. She had turned from a charming and beautiful young girl to a young and innocent girl with bright eyes and white teeth. Rejuvenation was the dream of many old people. However, for a young girl who was about to enjoy a beautiful life, such a thing was completely unacceptable. Therefore, in one night, Kunan, who had shaken Jianghu and was famous throughout the capital, disappeared. She left the Six Fan School, left the temple, visited famous mountains, visited divine doctors, and searched everywhere for a chance to heal her internal injuries and recover her body. But it was easier said than done. The eternal spring technique was the ultimate technique in the world. The reason why she had rejuvenated was because she had suffered an extremely serious internal injury. If she wanted to heal her body, she had to correct the eternal spring technique that she had cultivated wrongly. Then, she had to take advantage of the situation to stimulate and repair the Shaoyang meridian in her hand. Obviously, only a great grandmaster with profound internal strength and a profound realm could do this. Kunan was the eldest disciple of Wu Ho. She had her master's connections and reputation. If healing her injuries was an easy task, she would not have had to run around for 2 years. However, the reality was that she was disappointed again and again. She had also asked for help from the Tensei province. Empress had also helped her. After all, Kunan had Wu Ho behind her. Forming a good relationship with him was a wise move. However, the Tensei province, which had countless capable people, was also helpless against Ms. Ku's internal injuries. Her injuries could not be healed with medicine and could only be healed by a great grandmaster with supreme internal strength. However, failure after failure showed that the cultivation and methods of the great grandmasters of the empire were not enough to cure Ms. Ku's reverse growth. This was King embarrassing. But now, there seemed to be a glimmer of hope. Because a grandmaster whose martial arts cultivation base was unprecedented and whose martial prowess could shake both ancient and modern times had returned to Hudu. Judging from Sun Lang's terrifying cultivation base, which allowed him to sweep across mountains and rivers with a single sword strike in Jinling, he might really have a way to cure the internal injury that had troubled Kunan for a long time. When Empress thought of this, she revealed a Sun Ran sneer. Normally, she would not be willing to sit and watch Sun Lang heal Kunan's injuries and form a good relationship with Wu Ho. However, the situation was urgent, and she could not care so much. Let Kunan test it out. Because healing internal injuries required physical contact. At the very least, it had to be palm to palm. Kunan's illness was in the hand's minor yang 3 jiao meridian. The symptoms showed that the entire body was shrinking and the blood was flowing in reverse. If she wanted to completely reverse the situation, she might need full body contact. The Empress concubine revealed a malicious smile, but there was a hint of gnashing teeth in her smile. She had seen Kunan before. No matter if it was the normal Kunan or the lowly Kunan, the two could be said to have their own merits. They were both beauties that men could not shift their gazes away from. In her normal state, Kunan was a slender and elegant woman. She was a charming beauty with a smile that could move one's soul. However, in her lowly state, Kunan was a cute and charming little girl with red lips and white teeth. Although her appearance was pure and young, she had a mature charm that didn't match her appearance. There was a kind of contrasting charm to her. With Sun Lang's perverted heart and his sanctimonious character, he would definitely not give up this kind of opportunity to be in close contact with a peerless beauty in broad daylight. He would definitely put on a false front. After all, he was such a hypocritical and disgusting fellow. He would definitely want the female to take the initiative to beg him in every possible way. Only then would he put on an appearance of reluctance. But in his heart, he would feel good and enjoy it. The premise was that he could control his dirty ability freely. Otherwise, Empress recalled the previous few contacts with Sun Lang in her mind. His hands seemed to have magic. With a light touch, there would be a bone-eroding ecstasy that made people want to sink into it. It was simply immoral and shameless to the extreme. He was the public enemy of all women in the world. So if he still could not control his dirty ability freely, Nan would probably die. If he really used his hands to treat her internal injuries, and if there was physical contact. So he would refuse. Sun Lang would refuse. If he refused, if Kanan's injuries were not cured, it meant that Sun Lang's dirty ability was uncontrollable. Then, her counterattack plan would have a chance to succeed. Sun Lang, do you like to touch women? Then touch them to your heart's content. Don't say that I didn't give you a chance. I'm very good to you. I'll find a suitable time for you to touch all the young ladies of the imperial capital, all the good girls of the imperial capital, and all the peerless beauties of the imperial capital. And Kanan's side was also an opportunity. If Sun Lang could not control his dirty ability, he would definitely refuse Kanan's request. Moreover, he would reject her directly. He would not tell Kunan the real reason and his difficulties. So, there was an opportunity to sow discord and fan the flames, because the greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. These 2 years, Kunan had been constantly running around, constantly bumping into walls, constantly being disappointed. As a young woman, the Emperor's concubine could empathize with her feelings. Women were originally emotional creatures, easily going to extremes, easily going into a dead end. Therefore, Sun Lang's rude rejection would definitely evoke the anger in her heart. This was an opportunity she could make use of. Thinking of this, General Tensei smiled proudly. No matter who it is, when they see the light of hope after a long period of disappointment and despair, they will not hesitate to grab it. Therefore, after seeing the sword mark in the Bai Castle and knowing Sun Lang's cultivation, the Ku siblings will definitely return to the capital as soon as possible. Empress asked Wei Yin, when did Kunan appear outside the Bai Castle? Wei Yin replied, 2 days ago. General Tensei calculated the time and said, they traveled day and night. Judging from the Ku siblings' internal energy and lightness skills, they should be very close to the capital. She pondered for a moment before ordering, send men to patrol the capital. The Ku siblings have distinct characteristics. Ku Bowen is always clad in steel armor and has a strong build. Kunan is a beautiful girl and is easy to recognize. Have the subordinates pay attention to them and report back as soon as they discover anything. Yes, in the Copper Sparrow Pavilion, on the 7th floor of the Luan Feng Hemming restaurant, the door of General Shin's presidential suite was tightly shut. There was a piece of white paper pasted on the door with a few words written on it. Small things get lost. Big things knock on the door. I'm very busy right now. After Yin Song went upstairs, he saw Shan Xiongxin guarding the staircase. The other generals of Tianyuan, who had nothing better to do, were looking in his direction curiously. Yin Song came from the Ministry of Rites and was born to be his secretary. Now that Jiansheng was not in Shinto province, Sun Lang had no one to rely on. He temporarily took on the role of secretary and housekeeper. Now, he was holding a stack of invitations in his hands. He smiled helplessly at Shan Xiongxin and said, they all have to treat us to a meal. Shan Xiongxin raised his eyebrows and said, the situation is not clear now. Commander of War angered His Majesty in front of the Imperial Ancestral Temple. Aren't they afraid that His Majesty will be angry if they treat us to a meal at this time? Yin Song laughed and flipped through the invitations. Some people are not afraid of His Majesty's anger. Some people are afraid that His Majesty won't be angry. Some people are mostly under His Majesty's instructions, and some people have bad intentions. His smile became playful. And these people, TSK, Greenwood Fire, Xinshui Ruijin, and the ministers of the embassies of the 4 countries have all sent invitations. They are just here to watch the fun. These seem to be small things. Let's put them aside first. Or, Shan Xiongxin lowered his voice and said mysteriously, why don't you knock on the door and ask? Go to hell. Hanji said, I just sent back the news that Empress has come out of the Imperial City. It seems that she has passed. Speaking of which, it's strange. Why didn't the Marshal stop her outside the Imperial City? After the Imperial Ancestral Temple was dismissed, he ran straight back to the Copper Sparrow Pavilion and closed the door. How long has it been? Shan Xiongxin looked back. The door was tightly closed, and the notice in front of the door contained a murderous aura. He pondered for a moment and nodded seriously. It should be something very important. It was indeed something very important. In the suite, Sun Lang sat cross-legged with a serious expression. His eyes shot out a sharp light, as if he was facing a great enemy. It was as if he was facing a powerful enemy, or as if he was about to face a life-and-death battle. Other than that, there were two swords in his hands. One was incomparably sharp, and the other was as red as fire. If there was a knowledgeable martial artist who saw this scene, he would definitely cry out in surprise. Although the radiance of these two divine weapons had been concealed, they still emitted a peerless and brilliant aura. This was the spiritual energy that all divine weapons in the world possessed. One of them was like gold and stone, while the other was like a flowing flame. Both were divine swords. The Imperial Treasure, the Seven Luminaries Divine Sword. There were actually two in the hands of the same person. Sun Lang narrowed his eyes and took a deep breath. His gaze fell on the Gold Luminaries Divine Sword. This was not the original Gold Luminaries Divine Sword of the Imperial Army. It was the divine sword that Bai Yue had forged using the hero's soul. It was the old man's final entrustment and apology, like the passing of a hero's flag. As if it had sensed Sun Lang's gaze, the divine sword trembled slightly. Sun Lang maintained a faintly discernible connection with this holy sword. There was no formal contract between them, but there was a connection even deeper than a contract. This was Bai Yue's final gift. This Gold Luminary's divine sword had been forged and refined by Bai Yue. Not only was its power intact, it was also very compatible with Sun Lang. Other than that, it also brought a mysterious power to Sun Lang. Just like this, Sun Lang slowly held the Gold Luminary's divine sword in his hand, and pure metal power flowed into his body. At the same time, Sun Lang's own divine sword was also rapidly growing and hardening. Soon, it became a pillar that supported the heavens. It was as if it had taken Viagra. It was completely out of control and had been erect since last year. If a man had this kind of masculinity, he should be smug and proud. He should have a feeling of I'm so D***CK. However, Sun Lang looked at the towering divine sword below him. His heart did not waver. He even wanted to laugh. With that kind of protective power, just a handshake could make a woman reach the peak of pleasure. Although he had not really tried it, Sun Lang felt that if he did it for real, the moment his D***CK entered, the woman would most likely explode and die. So, no matter how hard, big, and long it was useless. Sun Lang expressionlessly threw the Gold Luminary's divine sword to the side. His gaze fell on the newly obtained Fire Luminary's divine sword. He swallowed his saliva and slowly stretched out his hand. That's right, this was the most important thing right now. Chapter 926. His heart was thumping wildly. Sun Lang's breathing became rapid. He was a little nervous. This feeling was like touching a girl's chest for the first time. He was looking forward to it, but also a little timid. He didn't know what it felt like and what would happen after he touched it. It was probably this feeling because he had never touched it before. The former commander of war of Tianyuan, the current general of Shunsei, was a public figure in the Hooded territory. He was a great rebel. He was the #1 warrior in the world. He was a great threat to the imperial court. The man named Sun Lang was the most terrifying warrior in the world, the most efficient killing weapon, and the most talented military commander. He had been through hundreds of battles and defeated one powerful enemy after another. The chaos of the Sky Demon, which had plagued the world for decades, had also been ended by his hands. He had experienced the cruelest wars in the world and the most terrifying enemies in the world. He had experienced everything and faced everything that he should face. Years of bloody battles and killing had made his heart as hard as stone. He would not hesitate, be afraid, or retreat. Logically speaking, such a person should have been fearless. But now he was hesitating. Even if he was a famous general in the world, Even if he was an invincible warrior, he still had his persistence and heart not. The Zhuoxian said that the important matters of the country were to worship and fight. The important matters of life were to kill and fuck. Sun Lang had been on the battlefield for 8 years. He had killed those who should have been killed and those who should not have been killed. Humans, Sky Demon. His hands were stained with the blood of countless people. He had long since grown tired of killing in the important matters of life. Half of his life had been completed. There was still the other half to be completed. F***CK. But he couldn't F***CK. He couldn't F***CK. Sun Lang covered his face and let out a sorrowful sigh. The final battle in the Great Desolate Mountain 2 years ago had changed too many things. Although he had escaped from that bloody hell, the huge scars and troubles had followed him like a shadow. Logically speaking, after retiring and traveling the world, he should have been able to make a name for himself in any country in the world by relying on his valiant martial prowess, overflowing talent, and the huge information advantage he had as a transmigrator. To a martial artist, strength was courtesy, and courtesy was power. He could have shamelessly become friends with all kinds of beautiful ladies from all over the world. Unfortunately, he couldn't do it all. What happened in the Great Desolate Mountain gave him a new lease of life, but it also cursed him. This curse was rather difficult to speak of. To put it simply, whether it was an 8-year-old girl or an 80-year-old old lady, regardless of whether he was willing or not, once he had physical contact with the other party, even if it was only to the extent of touching the back of the hand with his fingertips, the woman would obtain great physical and psychological pleasure and become a tax evader. There was a limit to a human's willpower. Humans were pitiful animals controlled by hormones. This intense pleasure that originated from their own bodies was something that humans could not resist. It sounded wonderful, but to Sun Lang, it was a curse. Because this ability was not under his control, and its power and effect were too strong. After all, everything was as bad as not enough. If physical contact only made the woman's spring tide surge, her body would ache and so on, then it was a necessary preparation for picking flowers, and using it in the bedroom would be very interesting. But F***king, just touching the hand was enough to make the other party roll their eyes and twitch endlessly. If they took off their clothes and hugged each other, they would most likely have a flood of water flowing out of their 9 orifices. And if he went in, someone would die, you bastard. You would die on the spot, your heart would explode, and your pores would spray out water. That was probably it. It was simply the most shameful reason for being a virgin. It was so funny that it was unbelievable. After the battle in the Great Desolate Mountain, Sun Lang traveled the world for 2 years. Most of his time was spent studying how to control this fatal ability, but it was of no use. It wasn't until a few months ago that he found a glimmer of hope and hypothesized that the power of the sacred sword could offset the power of the great protection, strength. And so he embarked on a journey to find the sacred sword. In the Bai family castle, he received the great white gold obsidian sword from the hands of an old friend. He was full of expectations to complete the power ritual with the sacred sword and receive the power of the great white gold obsidian sword into his body. The sacred sword of the great white gold obsidian sword responded to his expectations. Not only did it provide him with the power of the great white gold obsidian sword, but it also generously provided him with an additional benefit of Viagra. After he picked up the sacred sword of the great white gold obsidian sword, his second brother suddenly stood up. It was so hard that it could fight against a Jedi Knight. Its attack power, material properties, durability, and ammo capacity were all greatly improved. It jumped from a blue-grade magical equipment to a dark gold, ancient-grade equipment. This was truly a cause for celebration. A cause for celebration. What's the point of celebrating? I can't F***k a woman. What's the use of being hard? Am I supposed to F***k a man? Putting aside the useless sacred sword of the great white gold obsidian sword, today, another sacred sword fell into the hands of Sun Lang. After he received the sacred sword from Qi Lianyan yesterday, he was not in a hurry to take it for himself. He wanted to use it in the Imperial Ancestral Temple. So after he finished showing off in the Imperial Ancestral Temple, he immediately ran back to the Copper Sparrow Terrace. Compared to national affairs, life was more important. Even so, Sun Lang's hand approached the sacred sword of the great white gold obsidian sword. His 5 fingers were only a few inches away from the crystal-clear blade. He only needed to reach out a little more, and this rare divine weapon would be in his hands. But his fingers moved in the air a few times. His movements were a little hesitant. Sun Lang silently looked at the sacred sword of the great white gold obsidian sword beside him. His eyebrows trembled slightly, and a pained expression appeared on his face. Right now, instead of saying that he was about to touch a girl's chest, it would be more accurate to say that he had just enjoyed the full breasts of a stunning beauty. His hand was moving down her flat and smooth stomach, all the way to the bottom of her dress between her slender legs. He wanted to explore that last scene. That was the problem. This was because the golden radiant sacred sword had already encountered a problem once. In other words, there might be a problem this time as well. Or rather, the possibility of a problem occurring was even greater. There was indeed a mysterious scenery hidden under the skirt of a stunning beauty. But the problem was that the scenery could be a warm and humid valley shrouded in mist, or it could be a steep peak that rose from the ground like a pillar in the southern sky. Considering the situation of the gold glorious sacred sword, it was more likely that it was dangerous peak. However, humans were such creatures. In their long pursuit and persistence, they were unwilling to give up hope, even if there was only a slight glimmer of hope. They would not turn back until they hit a wall. Sun Lang suddenly laughed hollowly to himself. He gnashed his teeth and looked at the sacred sword of fire. What will it become? The water element was a great strength to protect one's health. The gold element was an indestructible golden spear, and what kind of ability would the fire element bring? Could it be that he was burning with desire? Would it make this great master very thirsty? Now that things had come to this, were they going to retreat? Of course not. I want to see what kind of trouble they can come up with. As if he had convinced himself, and as if he was cheering himself on, Sun Lang took a deep breath and grabbed the sacred sword of fire with his right hand. It's decided to be you. Come. He held the scorching, hot sword hilt. A blazing power poured into his palm, and the power of fire swept through his body like a stream of fire. Sun Lang's breathing stagnated slightly, and the blazing power of fire burned fiercely in his body. That's it. Then it was gone. Except for the blazing power of the sun in his body, there was no other change. There was no burning with desire, no heavy breathing, no thoughts of mating, and his body was not hot. There was no problem with his sexual desire. Everything was normal. No problem meant. Sun Lang blinked, and his eyes slowly lit up with the light of hope. He threw the sacred sword of fire to the side and picked up the gold glorious sacred sword again. The sacred sword on his body stood up at a speed visible to the naked eye. He threw away the gold glorious sacred sword again. The yurt that was propped up also slowly descended. He picked up the sacred sword of fire again. There was still no abnormality. The light in Sun Lang's eyes became brighter and brighter. In an instant, a word appeared in his mind and floated in his spiritual sea. It released a blazing golden light, dispelling the darkness and illuminating a flat and wide path for planting seeds. The name of this word was water, fire, Xiong, Ji. Sun Lang's body shook. There was only one truth. It must be like this. He jumped up vigorously and waved his fist like a teddy bear who saw beauty, and even stuck out his tongue. He was full of excitement, walking around the room, muttering to himself, and his breathing became more and more rapid. As the saying goes, practice is the only standard to test the truth. So, just find a woman to try it on. What? Where's the woman? Isn't this nonsense? This is the Copper Sparrow Pavilion. It's the largest and most famous brothel in the capital. More than half of the famous courtesans in the capital make a living here. This place is already my property. General Shint's body shook again. He smiled proudly, walked to the door, and pulled it open, looking like a leader who was going to explain the policies of the imperial court to the women who had lost their virginity. Shan Xiongxin, go find a... Before he finished speaking, he suddenly thought of something, and his expression froze, and he shut his mouth. Then he was startled. Shan Xiongxin and Pang Ji were standing at the top of the stairs, not far away, looking over in surprise. In the distance, a few large heads were popping out. A group of Heaven's Origin Army generals were looking over curiously with their big eyes, full of curiosity and the spirit of exploration. Look at your mother's chicken thigh. With General Shen's shout, the curious babies scattered like birds and beasts. Sun Lang rolled his eyes at Shan Xiongxin and Pang Ji and slammed the door. Idiots! Shan Xiongxin and Pang Ji looked at each other, dumbfounded. Sun Lang leaned against the door and shook his head vigorously. No, how can this matter be faked by others? If it gets out, my reputation will be ruined. If water and fire complement each other, and I can break it, then it's fine, but if I guess wrong, so I have to keep it a secret. Sun Lang raised his head, looked at the window of the room, and nodded to himself. Do it yourself, and you will have ample food and clothing. Chapter 927. People are not saints. They always have some hobbies and pursuits, whether good or bad. Cao Cao, a powerful minister at the end of the Eastern Han Dynasty, had a bad hobby. He controlled other people's wives. In Wancheng, he asked, "Are there any prostitutes in this city?" In the end, the most outstanding successor died. The most capable fighter, the double flower red rod, also died. He was pressed to the ground by Zhang Xiu for a good beating. After being honest for a few years, Cao Cao's old habit sprouted. He took a fancy to 2 lowly wives, so he waved his hand and brought 830,000 henchmen to the south to kidnap them. As everyone knew, he was beaten to a pulp. In the end, the lesson was, even if you are a powerful leader, you have to follow the basic rules. You can't be strong, you can't snatch, and you can't bring your henchmen to mess around. You see, when old Chow was in Wancheng, if he had honestly invited a prostitute to his house or asked for a girl from the local tyrant Zhang Xiu instead of directly King Zhang Xiu's aunt, then there wouldn't be so much trouble, right? As one of the 4 powerful ministers in the old feudal era, Sun Lang fully learned from the lessons of his predecessors. He had to be low-key, close to the people, not bully the weak, and not mess around. For example, when he was traveling around the world, he had been trying to find a way to control the great health preservation force. To find a way to control it, he had to constantly try and experiment. Experiments required specimens and subjects to observe. With his invincible martial arts skills, and in a foreign country where he was unfamiliar with, he could easily kidnap a pleasing and beautiful big sister to experiment on. He would send her home before she broke down, and that was already very humane. However, Sun Lang did not do that. Instead, he locked his eyes on the prostitutes who were involved in the prostitution business. Moreover, he was particular about fairness and justice. After the deed was done, he gave them a large amount of money and persuaded them to turn over a new leaf. It could be said that he was quite honest. But even so, his actions and motives were not understood by others. His legend in the fog city of the country of metal was even twisted into a perverted murderer who specialized in attacking prostitutes. That was probably it. Shinsei General Sun Lang was in the lawful camp, and he always did things according to the basic rules. He pushed open the window of the room. This was a top-notch suite on the 7th floor of the Luan Feng Hemming building. The scenery was exceptional, and the quality of the room was exalted. Looking down from above, one could see more than half of the imperial capital's scenery. The general leapt out gracefully, flipping his body like a leopard cat, leaping back and forth between the Luan Feng and Ming Tower's magnificent layers of flying eaves, avoiding the eyes of the patrolmen and sentries. After absorbing the power of fire into his body, there was not a trace of abnormality in his body. This gave Sun Lang hope. He had suffered a lot from the power of health and had not seriously touched a girl in the past few years. For a virgin who had nothing to do after saving the world and was invincible in the world, this was simply a first-class torture, right? Before he transmigrated, he was an ordinary person. He could not be like the rich second generations and rich people who enjoyed themselves every day and had fun every night. He also did not have the time to get a girlfriend and did not dare to go to prostitutes. He could only rely on the fantasy of changing his wife every 3 months, his powerful imagination, and a large number of terrible books on the internet to cast spells of love, and he longed for the era of intubation at the back of his head. After that, he transmigrated. Putting aside the suffering of those 6 years, he finally finished the war and survived. Moreover, his golden finger had been perfected, and his martial arts had reached an invincible level. It was not a delusion for him to be able to take on an entire country alone. In front of him was a vast and boundless world. Each of the 5 major countries had their own unique characteristics, countless local customs, countless beautiful women, and countless breasts. It was simply a beautiful future that was like heaven. It was a pity that he could not do it, because the power of health was terrifying. He could not even do it. Damn it. Could they still be reasonable? Huh? How could they bully people like this? It was simply too unfair, too inhumane, too pitiful. Every day, for more than 2 years, had been torture. Little Miss, with a smile like a flower, big breasts and big buttocks, should have been the most beautiful treasure in the world. But in his eyes now, she was just a piece of walking meat. He must dispel this curse. He must solve this problem, because touching breasts was the natural right of every human except for the otakus. No one could take it away from him. After understanding this obsession, it was not difficult to understand Sun Lang's current feelings. Enjoy. The power of fire entered his body, but there were no corresponding changes in his body. According to the theory of fire and water, the power of health that was distorted by the power of water was likely to be suppressed or even offset by the power of fire of the opposite attribute. In other words, the curse had disappeared. No words could describe the excitement and joy in Sun Lang's heart at this moment. What national affairs, what court struggle, what rebellion, these things were no longer important at this moment. They all had to give way to the life and sex of General Shinsei. In order to verify whether or not the power of health had really disappeared, the simplest way was to find a woman to test it on the spot. And this was the Copper Sparrow Terrace, the largest and best brothel in the capital and even the country. There were many beautiful and talented young ladies working here. He could just find any one of them, but he still had to quietly enter the village and do not shoot. Sun Lang quickly circled the Luan Feng and Ming Tower several times, listening to the sounds and identifying the figures. He spread out his telegnosis ability. He heard laughter, lazy murmurs, the crisp sound of a zither, and a pleasant singing voice. It was now the morning time, and the young ladies naturally had an immortal cultivation attribute. They slept late and woke up late. Many girls were still lazing around in bed. He could even hear the playful and coquettish sounds that would make his nose bleed. Then he found a problem. Sometimes it was not a good thing to have too many choices. The flowers gradually confused his eyes. When he could choose from groups of ladies at will, he also felt at a loss. Especially this kind of extremely private experiment, which was not known to outsiders, was more troublesome. It was still the same sentence. If the combination of water and fire really succeeded, if the power of health was really offset, then it did not matter. But if it did not succeed, if the power of health still existed, then it involved the problem of confidentiality and explanation. It was really troublesome, really troublesome. Of course, there was another option. With Sun Lang's martial arts, he could break into a room and knock the other party out before they could react. Then he could start the experiment. Anyway, this experiment did not need the other party's cooperation, so it did not matter if they were unconscious or awake. But this was not in line with Sun Lang's aesthetics. No matter what, he always respected women. He had never used his great strength to mess around. He tried his best to keep a distance from all the women to avoid some troublesome things. Even when he experimented with his great strength, he would discuss it with the ladies who were in the flesh business and give them a large sum of money after making them feel so good that they fell to the ground. So, Sun Lang hesitated for a moment. After careful consideration and pondering, he made a decision. Forget it. I'll go to Empress. She doesn't care. At the same time, a carriage passed the inspection of the city gate and drove into the capital. An old man and a young man were in the carriage. It was the old butler who brought the young master to the capital to seek refuge with relatives. The travel permit was correct, and there was a letter of introduction from the Mao family. The Mao family was a family of super arresters of the Six Fan School and had a great reputation in the capital. So the city gate officer let them in without hesitation and even chatted with the old butler. "I'm back." The short figure opened the window of the carriage and looked at the familiar streets and districts on both sides. He sighed softly. His voice was very tender, like the clear cry of a young phoenix, but it contained an indescribable sense of vicissitudes. Things remain the same, but people have changed. The vicissitudes of life have changed. In a flash, it has been more than 2 years. This little person was dressed in white clothes and white boots. His lips were slightly pursed, and his eyebrows were picturesque, as if he was carved out of jade. He had a graceful demeanor and a heroic spirit between his eyebrows. It was expected that when he grew up, he would be a handsome young master with a fine temperament and a good appearance. He sighed like an old man, but the old man sitting next to him didn't think it was strange. The old man suddenly spoke. His voice was not as old as when he talked with the city gate officer, but was very magnetic. His tone was low and powerful, making people involuntarily believe him. His voice was very suitable for speech and incitement, as if he was born to be a leader. He was very reliable and trustworthy. There was a kind of helplessness in his voice. "I just think, is it necessary to do this?" The young master stopped pretending and supported his chin with his white and tender hand. His voice became coquettish, and his eyes shone with cunning and wisdom. "Of course it is. We went to Qingzhou to see the sword mark and showed our skills. There is no lack of well-informed people in the world. At that time, there were so many people watching. Many people must have guessed our identity and know that we went to Sichuan." She looked at her small hand, which was white with a hint of red. It was like a warm white jade under the sun, but she didn't like it. The girl dressed as a man sighed. "I have become like this. For the past 2 years, I have been asking for medicine in Yin Hospital. As long as it is someone with a heart, they will know about this. Since they know that I went to see the sword mark in Qingzhou, they will definitely guess my thoughts. After all, I've been running around for the past 2 years with no results, which has driven me crazy. Even if there is a glimmer of hope, I have to try. Among the many great gurus in the empire, almost no one can cure my internal injury, because some of them don't have enough internal strength, and some of them don't have enough realm. The peerless masters with both skills and strength seem to be just a legend. But now, the legend has become reality. The sword mark, the commander of war, Jia Ying, the marshal of the empire who went missing in the Great Bear Mountain, and the most famous general of Tianyuan who was said to be abandoned by the king, has returned. Judging from the sword mark, if it was really him who waved his sword from Jinling, Summer Province, and the sword she rushed for thousands of miles and bombarded the Sichuan of Qingzhou and created such a chasm, then his cultivation has reached a supreme realm that no one has ever reached before. In other words, he is the last hope to cure my internal injury. If I can think of this, other people can think of it too. Therefore, from the moment we appeared in Qingzhou, our brother and sister were in the teeth of the storm. The commander of war has returned with ill intentions. The empire will definitely face a great political turmoil. Although we are small characters, my master is a sage in the martial arts world and the teacher of the emperor. Although he has retired, his influence is still widespread in the imperial court. Therefore, we have to be careful not to be used as a tool. Chapter 928. So we have to be careful. Don't be used as a tool. Kunan looked at the scenery of the imperial capital outside the window and sneered. After all, the imperial capital is still so stinky, and the imperial court is still so filthy. Everything can be related to politics in the end. The reason why Master retired was because he didn't want to continue staying in this big dye vat. Koboan thought for a moment and then realized, "You're talking about Empress?" The legal lowly said indifferently, "Her motive is the strongest. If I'm not wrong, that General Tensei must have sent people to patrol around. In the Battle of the Great Barren Mountain, her role was not glorious. Now that the commander of war has returned to settle the score, she must be the first to be involved. No matter what, she won't sit by and watch Jia Ying form a good relationship with Wu Ho." Ko Bowen frowned. Could it be that she's going to interfere? Of course not. With His Highness' ability to do as he pleases, how could he make it so obvious? Kunan said, "She only needs to find us, then appear and invite us, and then spread the news of our secret meeting. This is enough to arouse the ill feelings of the commander of war towards me." "Humph," Kaboan said, "people's hearts are sinister." Kunan said indifferently, "As a person in the imperial court, they have no choice. The emperor's concubine made a fatal mistake 2 years ago. Now, she can only repeat the same mistake and can't turn back. She has already been dragged into this." Kaboan said softly, "But you are now stepping into the vortex of your own accord. The Battle of the Great Barren Mountain is no small matter. The commander of war has returned to the court, and it will inevitably cause a great storm. You are now by his side, on the boat, and there is no turning back. I really don't know if this is right or wrong." "Actually, I don't know either, but..." Kunin looked back at her elder brother and said calmly, "But I know that if I continue to be like this and give up all hope and attempts, then when I look back on the past 50 years later and find that my past is blank, I won't grow up, I won't mature, I won't age, and I won't have a life. Time will stop, and time will freeze. I'll be guarding the body of a child that won't grow up or age until I turn into dust. At that time, I'll definitely regret it. I'll regret that I didn't have a complete life, that I didn't live freely." She closed her eyes, and a smile appeared on her lips. Regardless of whether the commander at that time was at the peak of his power and controlled the court, or if he died in defeat and turned to dust, I think I will regret it. I regret that I didn't try to find him back then, regret that I didn't ask him for help. At this point, Kanan's expression became sorrowful again. She said softly, "There isn't much time left. The shrinking of the body means that the meridians and sea of qi will shrink, which means that the cultivation base and internal energy will weaken. The weakening of internal energy will cause the meridians to lose their nourishment, and the bones will slowly solidify. If this drags on, I won't have a chance to grow up in this life. There isn't much time left." A trace of pain flashed through Kaboan's eyes. They were siblings. Taking care of his sister was the responsibility of an elder brother. His sister's pain, as an elder brother, he could also feel it. He said in a low voice, "Then do it. I will always be with you." "It's the opposite." Kanan turned her head and looked out the window, not looking at her elder brother's face. "If Commander of War can heal my injuries, then I will betray the sect and cut off all ties with the Ku family." Kaboan's heart trembled. The kindness of rebirth must be repaid with one's life. No matter if Jia Ying wants to rebel or conspire against the court, I will accompany her to the end. I am willing to bet my life for this, because compared to not aging for a lifetime, I want to live a more brilliant life. I want to leave traces of my perfect self in this world and live a more exciting life. She faced the eternally burning sun in the sky and murmured with a complicated expression, "After all, a life that doesn't age is so boring," Kaboan said in a low voice. "Little sister, but I can't implicate you. You, the family, and the master." Kunin smiled and said, "These years, everyone has been running around and working for me. But who told me to be a willful brat? If everything goes well, this will be the last time I will be willful." Kaboan was speechless for a moment. "All right, don't act like that. It's too ugly. Alas, in the past 2 years, you've given up your future and fame to run around for me. You've been with a woman like me every day. You become so sentimental." Kunin stretched out her soft and delicate hand and patted Kaboan's shoulder. She said in an old-fashioned manner, "Look at your eyes. It's like I'm going to the execution ground. I'm only talking about the worst-case scenario. On the other hand, if Commander of War succeeds, I will be the hero." She twisted her body and put on a flowery pose. She even threw a coquettish glance. But when a delicate little girl did this, not only did it not look coquettish, it looked very cute. Kunan deliberately said in a coquettish voice, "Moreover, your younger sister is a beauty that can captivate even birds and beasts. Now that my body is so young, my charm is already so amazing. When my internal injuries are healed and my body grows up again, how beautiful will I be? If the war marshal falls in love with me at first sight and kneels down before this lady's pomegranate skirt, then our Ku family will prosper. At that time, I can even give you, the eldest brother, a great future, because her acting was so stiff. Even Kuboan, who was worried sick at heart, laughed. After the eldest brother of the Ku family finished laughing, he shook his head and sighed. Do you know what I'm worried about now? You've placed all your hopes on the commander of war that you've never met. If he doesn't treat you, your emotional state will fluctuate greatly, and who knows what you'll do. You've also said that the undercurrents in the imperial capital are turbulent. Whether it's in the open or in the dark, who knows how many people are eyeing you covetously. If you're in an agitated mood, once you're taken advantage of by a villain, you may unknowingly become a gun in the hands of others. Kunan laughed. The little girl shook her slender fingers and smiled confidently. In the past, out of curiosity, I've collected information about that commander of war. I've also asked Junior Bao, who had been in contact with him before. That Marshal Jia is said to be a pervert who doesn't have the guts to do anything. I only need to cry a few times and use a few tricks to please him. How could he bear to reject me? The righteous brother's face became serious. Little sister, this is not something a good girl should say. You have to have self-respect. Kunan waved her hand impatiently. I know, I was just joking. Seeing that her brother was still scrutinizing and doubtful, the little loli shook her head helplessly. Jia Ying is a good person. This is what Junior Bao said. Back then, when I asked about General Zhan, although my Junior Bao was full of complaints and complained that Jia Ying was full of fallacies and misguided people all day long, every time he complained, he would subconsciously add words like, although his thinking is rebellious and deviant, he's actually not a bad person, so on. If my Junior Bao was reluctant to say that she's not a bad person, then she must be a good person. Hearing that, Kuboan was slightly relieved, but he still said, things are different now. Kunan reached out her hand and tapped his nose lightly. Then let me ask you, was the imperial capital bathed in blood? No. Was Jinling City massacred? No. Were the bodies of the black armored army piled up next to the sword mark outside the Bai family's castle? No. Did Mingzhou and Songzhou raise the flag of rebellion? No. Kunan tilted her head, and her watery eyes narrowed into crescents. Then is commander of war a bad person now? Kuboan was silent for a moment, and then he nodded. I understand. So what are we afraid of? Kunan waved her hand. Let's go and see commander of war. But Kuboan was a little embarrassed. But where is he? After they saw the sword mark in Sichuan of Qinzhou and realized that there was hope in it, they immediately set off for the imperial capital. They traveled day and night without rest, and except for eating, drinking, and going to the toilet, they spent all their time on the road. Naturally, they did not have the time to gather information or gather information. Therefore, even though they arrived at the imperial capital as fast as they could, they were still clueless about Sun Lang's situation. Kunan smiled confidently. Extraordinary people do extraordinary things. Commander of War disappeared for 2 years, and then he suddenly appeared in Jinling City with a thunderous boom, announcing his return to the world. This kind of person is usually quiet, but when he makes a move in Jinling City, his next move must be as fierce and violent as a thunderbolt. In other words, he must have caused a big commotion in the imperial capital. Kuboan suddenly understood. Then let's find a restaurant in the market to gather information. No need to be so troublesome. Kunan had been looking out of the window, and now she had found her target. She leaned out of the window, waved her hand, and said with a smile, Brother, I see that you are strolling along the street with a calm look, and your eyes are not impatient. You're not waiting for someone, right? Where are you going? I have just entered the imperial capital and am not familiar with the place. I would like to ask you a few questions, and I would like to give you a ride as a reward." The person on the other side seemed to be stunned for a moment, and then he laughed. "A ride? Okay." Caboan whispered, "What are you doing now? If we go to the market to gather information, it will be too noisy and easy to be discovered." This young man's eyes are calm, and his steps are steady. It seems that his martial arts are not weak, but his expression is very relaxed and leisurely. He is looking left and right as he walks, and the material of his clothes is also very luxurious. At first glance, I can tell that he is a young master of an extraordinary family. He is the only one on the whole street who looks out of place and is very conspicuous. That is why I noticed him at first glance. This kind of noble young master is the most well-informed. If there is any movement in the upper class of the imperial capital, he must have heard about it. If you want to gather information, you will most likely find the right person. What if it is useless? If it is useless, I will go find Junior Brother D. Not Bauschiren? No, he is too impulsive. He will definitely ruin things. Kunin stretched out her leg and kicked Caboan, open the door. For the past 2 years, Kunan had been the one to make decisions about traveling to the north and looking for medicine. Caboan was only responsible for physical work. After a long time, it had become a conditioned reflex. Hearing this, the elder brother of the Ku family subconsciously stood up to open the door. Then, he helplessly glared at his little sister. This girl was really spoiled by him. Kunan was already sitting upright and still, showing a well-behaved smile. Caboan got out of the car and opened the door. A young man in luxurious clothes walked towards them. Indeed, as his little sister had said, this young man looked very good. His martial arts foundation was not bad, and his appearance was also very good. His eyes were calm, and he had a smile on his face. The most important thing was his temperament. The other party seemed to have a kind of confident temperament, which made his movements look natural and unrestrained, not restrained or arrogant. There was a sense of indifference. He smiled. "No matter how far it is, will you send me there?" Caboan also smiled. "No matter who we are, will you be willing to get on the car?" The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Then, the elder brother of the Ku family realized that he was disguised as an old housekeeper and not the young master of the Ku family. He hurriedly stretched out his hand and said, "Please." The young man just looked at him with a smile, nodded and said, "Thank you." The two of them got on the car one after another. Kunan cupped her hands and said, "Greetings, brother. Please forgive me for my rudeness." The young man smiled and nodded. There was no judgment or contempt in his eyes. He also cupped his hands in return. This kind of behavior made Kunan feel very comfortable. In the past 2 years, she had been running around everywhere. She did not know how many curious, surprised, contemptuous, and even greedy and rude gazes she had faced. Only the young man in front of her was calm and polite. Little brother's surname is Mao. I'm the 5th in the family. If brother doesn't mind, you can call me Wulong. Kunan casually made up a name. May I ask what brother's surname is? The man maintained a decent smile, revealing his shining teeth. Surname Li Shimin. Li? Kunan muttered. May I ask? Li was the royal surname. Li Shimin waved his hand and said with a smile, No, I can't afford to be associated with you. Seeing the other party deny it, Kunan very wisely did not pursue this question. She wanted to find out more information. If she got to the bottom of this question, it would easily arouse the other party's displeasure and vigilance. Therefore, she said, Then I will call Brother Li. Brother Li, us master and servant are here to visit relatives in the capital. We have just arrived in the capital. The prosperity of the capital has blinded our eyes. We admire the scenery of the capital and admire the education of the people. On a whim, we invite brother to the carriage for a chat. If it is abrupt, please forgive us. May I know where brother wants to go? Li Shimin smiled and said, Pingtian Square. Kuboan knocked on the carriage door and told the coachman the itinerary. The coachman had a map of the capital in his hand. He raised his whip, the horse neighed, and slowly moved forward. Inside the carriage, Kunan took out fruits and snacks from a secret compartment and brewed tea. The two of them sat opposite each other. The famous detective began to inquire about information. Kunan was one of the 4 famous detectives in the past. Although she had resigned several years ago, her professional skills and accomplishments had not deteriorated. In terms of interrogation techniques and conversation skills, she was naturally very proficient. She deliberately avoided sensitive topics and talked about astronomy, geography, local conditions, and customs with Thisly Shimon. The two of them sat and chatted. Unexpectedly, they chatted very well. As the conversation went deeper, Kunin secretly admired Thisly Shimon in her heart. Thisly Shimon was very knowledgeable. No matter what topic he was talking about, he could give you a clear and logical explanation. Speaking of Empress, brother, you don't know? Thisly Shimon slapped his thigh, his saliva flying everywhere. Just today, His Majesty almost granted Empress Tensei a marriage. Who is the prince consort? You definitely won't be able to guess. Chapter 9:29. The brother and sister of the Ku family were dumbfounded, because the news that Li Shimin had told them was 2F** King explosive. Koboan glanced at his sister and found that she was also at a loss. Although Kunin had speculated that Commander of War must have stirred up a storm in the capital, she didn't expect him to play it so big. With Li Shimin's ingenious speech, the image of the general of the Shunsei grew bigger and bigger. He was simply the embodiment of greatness and righteousness. The emperor almost granted him a marriage. Hundreds of officials bowed to him, and the #1 general of Tianyuan was actually him. That was probably how it felt. According to Li Shimin's passionate words, in the past few days, the great general's son, with his swift and decisive offensive, his wisdom in strategizing, and his will that was as firm as a rock, had carried out a brutal wipeout and annihilation of the Sky Devil forces hiding in the imperial capital, as if it was a cold winter. In order to not alert the extraterrestrial demons, General Sun stood his ground against the opinions of the masses and took the full responsibility of mobilizing the troops in private. He took the lead and launched a decisive attack on the Copper Sparrow Pavilion, which was a complicated organization. He destroyed an important stronghold of the Sky Demon. Not only did he deal a heavy blow to the cunning remnants of the Sky Demon, he also seized a large amount of the enemy's supplies and intelligence. He defeated the arrogance of the Sky Demon and rescued a group of good comrades, led by Prince Zhongshuan, who swore not to bow down to the Sky Demon. From the Copper Sparrow Terrace, he found a large amount of intelligence about the Sky Demon. He realized that many of the nobles and even important officials of the empire were deeply involved in this matter. Regardless of the tiredness of running and the fact that his actions had already offended countless forces of the imperial court, General Sun, who was wholeheartedly devoted to the country, took the intelligence and memorials and rushed to the imperial city overnight with the loyal 14th prince to seek an audience with the emperor. However, for some unknown reason, 2 ministers and princes who were devoted to the country were refused entry. Outside the gate of heaven influence stood 2 exhausted figures alone. In the darkness, there was a sinister smile from a sinister shadow. His Majesty was deceived by the treacherous ministers, and the loyal ministers could not go up to the heavens to hear. Unwilling to give up, the general decided to fight to the end with his own strength. He returned to the Copper Sparrow Pavilion with King Zhongshuan and immediately started the follow-up work. With his powerful charisma and shining soul, he infected everyone in the Copper Sparrow Pavilion. Be it lords or ministers, famous prostitutes or whoremongers, they were all conquered by the integrity and bravery of this great hero of Heaven Yuan and were willing to work with him. A just cause enjoys abundant support, while an unjust cause finds little support. The general, who returned in disappointment in front of the palace, gained even more. He sent out men and horses to contact the important officials of the imperial court and his former subordinates. Some responded enthusiastically, while others were incomparably cold. After leaving the imperial court for 2 years, some had already forgotten this hero. In order to persuade his former strongest ally to join him, the general ignored the dissuasion of his fellow officers and went to Tensei province alone to seek help, even though he knew what he was about to face. Yes, the general of Tensei, the royal empress, a powerful woman with outstanding military achievements, was once the general's closest comrade in arms, but their relationship had long been broken. Love had turned into hatred, because the general had realized the danger of the battle of the Great Barren Mountain, and also had a premonition that he was about to embark on an extremely difficult and lonely road. He hoped that at least there would be a young enough guardian of the empire. Therefore, he chose to deliberately hurt the empress so that her love would turn into hatred, so that when she heard the news of his death, she would not follow him. Yes, he broke off the engagement. Now, he had to taste the bitter fruit that he sowed back then alone. For the empire, for the people, the general knocked on the gate of Tensei province alone. There, he encountered unimaginable ridicule and humiliation. The officials of Tensei and even Her Highness Empress all mocked and ridiculed him, thinking that his theory of the sky demon threat was whimsical. Some people even punched and kicked him, but the general did not fight back, nor did he talk back. After receiving a disappointing answer, the general left Tensei province in disappointment. Behind him, he heard the loud laughter and ridicule of the people. The next day, the counterattack from the evil forces followed. Qi Lianyan, the sword saint of fire, openly insulted the soldiers of Tianyuan on the street, forcing General Shunsei to show up. He questioned the story of the Great Barren Mountain and accused General Shunsei of having something to do with the death of the late sword saint Qi Lianyan. His words were as sharp as knives. In the face of such insults and accusations, the general still insisted on persuading people with virtue. Because that was the younger brother of his old friend, he chose to forgive and tolerate. He rationally refuted the absurdity of the rumors and reprimanded the other party for insulting the Qi family and shaming the soul of his brother. The young Qi Lianyan was intimidated by the general's righteousness. He cried bitterly and reined in the horse at the edge of the cliff. When he suddenly regretted and was about to reveal the name of the mastermind behind the scenes, he was instantly silenced by a terrifying force. It was said that General Sun, who did not have time to act, howled to the sky with Qi Lianyan's body in his arms. His voice was so sorrowful that it moved the heaven and earth. 2 years ago, he had witnessed his elder brother's death in battle. 2 years later, he had to watch his younger brother follow in his footsteps. No one could understand the pain and self-blame in his heart. The onlookers in the imperial capital were all moved by the general's sentiments. They were moved to tears and praised the general for repaying evil with kindness and treating people with leniency. He had the style of the ancient sages. However, the general was extremely sorrowful and miserable. He closed his door to meditate and did not sleep for the entire night. His heart was in turmoil. He thought of the late old Bai and the blood and sacrifice in the Great Barren Mountain. He was at a loss. He was shaken. He did not know if he could persevere. At this moment, he seemed to have realized something. Before dawn, he brought the divine sword entrusted by Bai Yuwei and the divine sword left behind by Qi Lianyan to the imperial ancestral temple. The emperor was unwilling to see him, so he went to find the previous emperor. In front of the sages of the imperial ancestral temple, he brought along Bai Yuwei's entrustment and regret and said a few words to the previous emperors. At the same time, in the morning court, the despicable and treacherous officials slandered the general's actions last night. They slandered the emperor, intending to punish him. Although the friends of justice argued for it, 2 fists were no match for 4 hands. The court was cold, and the situation was getting worse. At this moment, a fierce divine light shone from the direction of the imperial ancestral temple. The loyalty and uprightness of the general had moved the heavens and the previous emperors. Thus, flowers fell from the sky, golden lotuses sprouted from the ground, and a strange phenomenon was born from the blue dome of heaven. Under the gaze of the heroic souls of the previous generations, the sacred fire sword shone with an incomparably dazzling sword light. In this glorious sword Qi, in the resonance of the imperial army, the general saw the face of the previous emperor and the sacred fire sword Saint Qi Lianyan, who had passed away. The previous emperor had given him a mission, and his old friend had entrusted him with the divine sword. At this moment, he knew that he was not alone in this battle. Because of the vision in the imperial ancestral temple, the emperor had left. Because of the treacherous officials and the obstruction of the Dark Hands, the current emperor had never met the general. Now, under the guidance of the previous emperor and the protection of the heroic souls, the emperor finally met the marshal of the empire in the imperial ancestral temple, who had walked alone for 2 years and sacrificed everything for the empire. The monarch and his official presented a memorial to each other and had a secret meeting in the imperial ancestral temple. The general was finally able to reveal his discovery and worries. The wise emperor admired the general's loyalty and bravery and thanked him for everything he had done for the country. In front of the imperial ancestral temple, he personally introduced this outstanding military officer to the other officials. He decided to put the general in an important position and wipe out the last remnants of the Sky Demon. At the same time, in order to thank the general and to restore the broken relationship, the emperor decided to officially marry Empress Tensei to General Shinsei. But General Sun refused. It was not because he did not love her, but because he loved her deeply. It was because he knew that Empress had not forgiven him, and he knew that Empress would definitely obey the emperor's orders. But he did not want that kind of love. He did not want to make things difficult for the person he loved. So he refused first. He told the emperor that he wanted to pursue Her Highness Empress again, obtain her forgiveness, and take back this relationship. This was his mistake, so he wanted to personally make up for it. The emperor agreed with a smile and gave his blessing as a father. Her Highness Empress was embarrassed and angry. She ran away in front of everyone. At that moment, she showed the shyness and charm of a young girl, and it was firmly imprinted in everyone's hearts. Thunderous applause rang out in front of the imperial ancestral temple for a long time. When the Ku siblings heard this, they were already stunned. This story was full of ups and downs. It incorporated many elements of military affairs, conspiracy, temple planning, hot-bloodedness, espionage, and even love. It was full of twists and turns and was full of surprises. The plot was fascinating. Kuboan felt the general's loyalty and bravery, while Kunan was moved by the unforgettable love. For a moment, they were speechless. Wait. Kunan shook her little head. She still felt that something was not right. No matter what, the general in the story was too noble and righteous. When Li Shimin was telling the story, she had specially confirmed that the commander of war, Jia Ying, had changed his name to Sun Lang. She had thought that Li Shimin was talking about someone else. It was a bit suspicious, but she looked at Li Shimin. His eyes were as clear as spring water, and his face was full of gratitude and admiration. It seemed that for him, telling this story once was another spiritual baptism. At this time, he was also immersed in the story, moved by the general's greatness and sacrifice. This expression, no matter how she looked at it, it did not seem like he was lying. There was no sign of guilt, and there was no sign of lying. His eyes were firm, and his expression was pure. What Li Shimin said seemed to be true, but there was a problem. Kunan asked, "Brotherly, how do you know so clearly?" Li Shimin smiled and said, "A just cause enjoys abundant support, while an unjust cause finds little support. Although the truth is hidden in the dark, the dawn is not far away. The eyes of the masses are as bright as snow." After they knew the truth, they spontaneously spread the general's deeds. The hot-blooded and righteous scholars wrote poems and articles, and the rich who worried about the country and the people funded the printing. Everyone spread the story by word of mouth. Overnight, the story that happened in the past few days spread all over the streets and alleys of the imperial capital. Hearing this, Kunan was 80% convinced. Of course, she only believed that Li Shimin was not lying. No matter whether the general was a loyal official or a treacherous one, he was extremely good at manipulating public opinion. He took advantage of the situation and still pretended to be innocent. Empress and His Majesty were about to die of anger because of him. But it's just right. I'm ready to rely on him. The thicker his skin and the more flexible his methods are, the more valuable it is to rely on him. After all, in this kind of world, honest people will be at a disadvantage. Thinking of this, Kunin secretly glanced at Li Shimin. For example, this idiot was too honest. He believed whatever others said. The Zhan Shui didn't give him a single copper coin, so he took the initiative to brag about the other party. He didn't know that he was being used as a pawn, and he didn't know that he was being cheated by others. It was simply too embarrassing. If if Sun Lang was as stupid as him, I would have to reconsider. In front of them, Li Shimin still had a look of admiration on his face as he said, "The two of you, although Sun Lang, the divine strategist general of divine literature or martial arts, didn't bring a single arrow or a single tael of silver, he brought the ideology and spirit of fighting against the extraterrestrial demons to this befuddled imperial capital. His famous battle proclamation, the final battle against the extraterrestrial demons, was widely read by the passionate masses overnight." The Ku siblings' expressions were somewhat conflicted. In all fairness, the story was quite interesting. To say nothing of other things, the general's eloquence was very good. Whether it was his speech at the Copper Sparrow Terrace, "If you don't stand on my side, then you stand on the Sky Demon's side," or his angry rebuke of Qi Lianyan on the street, "I've never seen such a shameless person," or his words to Wen Quanfu, "The heavens change, the divine weapons change, and they belong to the virtuous. This is the law of nature." They all sounded very catchy and very applicable. So they were also slightly interested in the article written by the general. What they were conflicted about was they were afraid that if they listened too much, they would become like Li Shimin. In short, they were conflicted. After listening to the story and chatting with Li Shimin about some more details, Kunan became even more excited. No matter how much artistic embellishment there was in Li Shimin's words, the main thread was definitely real. Sun Lang had only just returned to the capital, but he had already overturned the Copper Sparrow Terrace, killed the Fire Sword Sage, and made a name for himself in the Imperial Ancestral Temple. If all of this had been done intentionally by the general, then his methods were truly too frightening. Kunan had already taken him as her greatest hope of healing her injuries, and had also made preparations to rely on him. After all, this was a great kindness that she could only repay with her own body. Otherwise, she would implicate her master, causing Wu Ho's reputation to be tarnished, and in his later years, he would once again step into the quagmire of the imperial court. In this sort of situation, she naturally hoped that her future master would be a man of great talent and bold vision. But Kaboan's mood was even more complicated. From the various actions of this General Shunsei, his plans were definitely not small. He had only just returned to the imperial court, yet he had already done such a world-shaking thing. In the future, he would turn the entire imperial capital upside down. In this sort of situation, if his little sister were to rely on him, how could she possibly stay out of trouble? As an elder brother who loved his little sister, he was naturally very worried. The brother and sister both had their own thoughts. And Li Shimin was still excitedly reciting the poem that General Shinsei had recently written to express his loyalty. "Wait until autumn comes, September 8th, when my flowers bloom, 100 flowers will die." But at this moment, Kaboan's expression suddenly changed, and he turned his head to the right. At the same time, the carriage driver outside stammered, "Two masters in front." In front, the orderly sound of horse hooves came from afar, and from the sound, there were more than 10 elite cavalry rushing towards them. The Ku family brother and sister's expression immediately became serious. Li Shimin nonchalantly finished reciting the poem and looked at the solemn expression of the brother and sister. He smiled and said, "Have the two of you provoked some trouble? Meeting is fate, and the two of you are willing to give me a ride. Leave this matter to me. I feel that my name in the imperial capital still has some use." He thought for a while, then said, "The two of you do not need to thank me. If you really want to thank me, I have been with you for so long today. You only need to sincerely say, 'I wish General Shinsei many wives and concubines, many children and grandchildren.' How about it?" What was all this about? The Ku family brother and sister bitterly smiled. Name? Had some use in the imperial capital? If their guess was correct, this group of people coming for them was very likely from Tensei province. So what use was Li Shimin's name? Then a calm voice came from outside. Tensei Province's Ho Junji greets the honored guests. As expected, when he heard the name of Tensei Province, Li Shimon's expression immediately changed. He became shocked, confused, and a little embarrassed. Conan had been paying attention to the changes in his expression, and from the looks of it, the other party should be scared. However, they had met by chance, and Empress was so powerful that it was not strange for him to be scared. Kuboin was a kind person, and he sighed and said, "Sorry to have implicated your excellency." At the same time, Li Shimin also sighed and said, "Sorry to have implicated the two of you." The two of them said these words almost at the same time, and then they looked at each other, stunned. Then the two of them said in unison, "Tensei Province is looking for you?" Kuboin nodded dumbly. Li Shimin's expression became even more awkward. "Really?" he asked cautiously. "You're not bragging? Why are they making things difficult for you?" Kuboin said faintly, "It's a long story." Li Shimin thought for a moment, and then said seriously, "I always keep my word. No matter who they're looking for, I'll send them away. In exchange, I want the two of you to promise me one thing." He did not wait for the two of them to agree, and said sincerely, "After I get out of the car, the two of you must leave immediately. You must cover your ears and not listen to a single word. After you leave, forget about what happened today, okay?" Before Kunan could say anything, Kuboin flatly refused. "We martial artists will draw our swords in anger when we see injustice on the road. Besides, we've only met by chance, and it's fate. How can I leave Brother Li? Brother Li is a sincere gentleman, and I will not abandon you. No matter who Tensei Province is looking for, I will advance and retreat with Brother Li." Li Shimin showed a pained expression. "Actually, you don't have to be so polite." At this moment, Conan asked in confusion, "Just who is Brother Li?" She had once been a constable and was very experienced in recognizing people. She had only glanced at Li Shimin in a panic, but now that she looked carefully, she could naturally see that Li Shimin's pained expression was one of helplessness and awkwardness, not panic and fear. This also meant that he did not think that the people from Tensei Province were a threat, but he was embarrassed to face the people from Tensei Province. And he wants us to leave immediately? Is he afraid of exposing his identity? What's there to be afraid of? Surnamed Li? Could it be that he's actually a prince? Using his status as a member of the imperial clan to brag about Sun Lang to us is truly rather shameful. Now that I think about it, this Li Shimin is rather cute. Conan smiled and pursed her lips. Since that's the case, at this moment, Ho Junji coldly said, "Honored guest, how long are you planning to stay inside? My master has warmly invited you to meet him." "Meet him?" Li Shimin glanced at the Ku siblings and sighed. "It seems like he really is looking for you." Conan was confused. "How does Brother Li know?" Indeed. If it was a prince, Empress wouldn't have wanted to meet him in such a manner. Conan was still lost in her thoughts and did not answer Ho Junji's question. But soon after, the sound of hooves could be heard. It was clear that even more horsemen were converging. Not long after, the three of them heard Ho Junji respectfully greet, "Your Highness, you've come." Your Highness. Who was he referring to? It was obvious. It was Empress, the most powerful woman in the world, the #1 heroine of Tianyuan. Kunan and Ku Bowen's expressions completely changed. They didn't expect that the Empress concubine would personally come to stop them. It seemed that the General of Divine Strategies had indeed given the Empress concubine a lot of pressure. Li Shimin had an extremely complicated expression on his face. F***CK. Kunan stole a glance from his side. Even with her torch-like eyesight, her ability to judge people, she could not quite understand the meaning behind Li Shimin's eyes. There was excitement. There was also doubt. And even more, there was sigh and embarrassment. It seemed as if he had found a priceless, one-of-a-kind jade lying in a smelly latrine pit. That expression of wanting to take it, but hesitating, was probably like this. She heard Li Shimin muttering to himself. To come at a time like this, the horses neighed as they approached. Empress Tensei's cold and proud voice rang out. "It's been a long time, Miss Ko. Please show yourself." Kunan pursed her lips and looked at Li Shimin. Her intuition told her that there was a chance. Li Shimin looked up at her and said sincerely, I can help you get rid of the people outside. In exchange, can you knock your head against the carriage and knock yourself out? Why? Perhaps the repeated insults had angered the soldiers of Tensei province. Ho Junji shouted, Empress has come in person. Why aren't you coming out to welcome him? This is a crime of disrespect. Empress said indifferently, there's no need to stall for time. Miss Ku, I sincerely invite you and just want to say a few words to you. It's indeed rude of you to reject me. How about this? Since it's inconvenient for you to get off the carriage, I'll get on the carriage and talk. The driver was so scared that he hid to the side. The sound of footsteps approached until it stopped in front of the carriage. The next moment, the carriage door was suddenly pulled open. The people outside the carriage and the people inside the carriage looked at each other. In just a few seconds, Kunan witnessed the change in His Highness Empress's expression. It was so fast, so changeable, and so comical. It was like watching a play. Of course, the two of them couldn't let the Emperor's concubine, who had outstanding military achievements, lose her composure. In fact, after opening the car door, the Emperor's concubine only had one person in her eyes. Under the surprised gazes of Kunan and Ku Boen, Li Shimin waved to Empress. You might not believe it, but this is a coincidence. He extended his hand to Empress, his expression calm and gentle. Let's talk in the carriage. Come, I'll give you a hand. Chapter 930. I can't get in this carriage. This was probably the most instinctive thought that flashed through Empress's mind. At this moment, all sorts of emotions welled up in her heart. These complex emotions were difficult to describe with words. Ever since Sun Lang had returned to the capital, she had been suppressed at every turn and had suffered several major losses. Not only had she lost face in front of the court, she had even lost face in front of her imperial father. She had learned from this painful experience and believed that the crux of the problem lay in Sun Lang's extremely despicable ability. As long as this ability could still be used, she would be at a natural disadvantage. This bastard only needed the slightest bit of physical contact to humiliate her in public. Thus, she had to resolve this problem. This was of utmost importance. For this reason, she had prepared all sorts of crafty and vicious plans to make that despicable bastard suffer. But all these plans were based on the premise that Sun Lang could not freely control his despicable ability. In order to ascertain this point, someone had to probe him. Kunan, who had been afflicted by the eternal spring art, was undoubtedly the best candidate to do so. She had already formulated a series of plans and excuses for this. When she realized that Kunan would enter the city in disguise, she had mobilized her men to place elite spies at the four gates and then sent people to communicate with the guards at the four gates. After all these schemes, she had finally found a clue. After all, she was a powerful general of the Tensei. If she put all her strength into it, she could accomplish most things in the world. This was the result of all her scheming. After all, no matter how brilliant Kunan's schemes were, she could never have imagined that she would be so highly regarded by the current court's empress. But when she opened the carriage door and saw Sun Lang's face, all her plans became a joke. In that instant, the empress concubine's hair stood on end. Her mind was frantically warning her, and her heart was ice cold. She felt like all the blood in her body had frozen. A trap. This was a trap. This was a trap set by that bastard Sun Lang. Trap, trap, trap. Inside and outside the car, in less than 5 steps, Sun Lang had already raised his hand to grab this side. Ho Junji and the other Tensei soldiers were 10 paces away. Emperor Concubine's face couldn't help but reveal a look of fear and panic. To Sun Lang, the distance of 5 steps was close to nothing. This guy's martial arts had already reached the realm of invincibility. Looking at the whole world, within 5 steps, there was probably no one who could escape his killing move. Besides, he didn't want to kill anyone. He just wanted to reach out and touch her gently. He could touch anywhere as long as he touched it. For Empress, the consequences of touching her were worse than being killed. What to do? What to do? She had already tasted that kind of feeling in Mingzhou, and on the way to Qinzhou, she had often been casually teased by Sun Lang. No one knew better than her how evil that kind of obscenity was. If he was flirted with by the other party in this kind of situation, in front of his subordinates, in front of the Ku family siblings, and even in front of passers-by, he would involuntarily make a sound of shame, reveal an undignified expression, or even feel his legs go weak and fall to the ground in exhaustion. His reputation would be ruined. No matter what, Empress was still a woman. Before becoming a Tensei general, she was still a woman. When it came to shamelessness, women were at an innate disadvantage compared to men. Thus, she did not want this to happen no matter what. Absolutely not. What to do? Time seemed to slow down as Empress's mind spun at an incredible speed. How should she deal with this massive danger that was right in front of her? Suddenly, a thought flashed through her mind. Dazzling golden light flashed, and the sharp glow of the saber dazzled. Bestowed by the Son of Heaven, the divine weapon of the imperial household. This was the highest achievement of the imperial weapons supervisor of the imperial palace, and it had once been used by Emperor Xian's imperial army. It was a divine weapon that could contend with the 7 luminaries' sacred sword. The name of the saber was Celestial Origin. The power of the imperial army flowed vigorously in her body. Empress shouted loudly and chopped down at Sun Lang's arm with the saber. Die! Sun Lang's 5 fingers on his right hand moved as if he was playing a pipa. In an instant, he gently and slowly twisted the heavy Tianyuan saber. Empress felt the web between her thumb and forefinger go numb, and her hand that was holding the saber involuntarily moved backward, exposing her weakness. Amidst her shocked and desperate expression, Sun Lang stretched out his left hand and touched her head. Ah! In an instant, the ice and snow melted, and spring returned to the earth. A strange change that made the general of heavenly strategies furious and ashamed emerged in her body. Her cold eyes involuntarily turned into peach blossoms, and 2 red clouds appeared on her tender, white, and smooth cheeks. Her powerful legs suddenly became weak, and her breathing instantly became rapid. Then she staggered back. But she could hold on. The Tianyuan saber worked. Her guess was right, and so was her experience. The power of the imperial army could offset Sun Lang's obscene ability, even if it was only a part of it. But why? Why could the Tianyuan saber restrain his obscene power? Could it be that only the Tianyuan saber could do it, or could it be that any imperial army could do it? Why was it like this? This thought only flashed in her mind for a moment. There were priorities. Empress immediately flew back. Her martial arts was one of the best among the younger generation, but it was not enough in Sun Lang's eyes. Even with the Tianyuan saber in her hand, it was impossible for her to escape from Sun Lang's evil claws at such a close distance. It was supposed to be like this. But for some reason, Sun Lang did not pursue her after he succeeded in touching her head. Instead, he showed a rather sad expression, and his eyes were extremely disappointed and lonely. This gave Empress a chance to escape. When she raised the Tianyuan saber, the Tensei soldiers behind her had already reacted and rushed forward without any regard for their own safety. They advanced and retreated with Empress, and in a moment, they protected General Tensei behind them. The General of Heavenly Strategies had walked in a circle in front of the floodgates, and had almost caused a complete collapse. Even so, her breathing was a little ragged, her face was still flushed, and she was sweating a little. In addition, she was ashamed and furious, and wanted nothing more than to swallow Sun Lang alive on the spot. She looked at the Ku siblings in the car. Sun Lang had actually hidden the car in advance and waited for her to come to him. It was obvious that this was a long-planned conspiracy. This little bitch must have secretly colluded with Sun Lang and set up this vicious trap together. Damn it! Damn it! She gritted her teeth and shouted, "Kunan, remember this." Miska was dumbfounded. Huh? What was going on? What happened? What was going on? When they entered the city, they happened to meet a guy with an extraordinary temperament who did not fit in with the people around, so they invited him to come in and ask for information. They listened to the stories along the way and finally met Tensei Province. Empress actually came in person and forced them to go to Tensei province for a chat. At this time, Empress Tensei opened the door and saw Li Shimon's face. Immediately, her expression changed from calm to shock and confusion, and then to panic. Then she pulled out her saber and slashed. Li Shimon easily pushed her saber away and then gently patted her head. It was like stroking a kitten, like comforting a lover, like an intimate and natural action between lovers, as if he was rebuking Empress for her naughty behavior just now. Sure enough, after being patted on the head, Empress became shy. Her expression became very shy. Her eyes were about to water. Her face was also red. Her breathing became rapid. She became like this after being patted on the head. Putting her master's reputation on the line, her ability to judge people, and her advanced experience as an old leftover woman, Detective Kunan could conclude that there was treachery, love, but what did this have to do with her? I didn't do it on purpose. Although Kunan didn't like Empress very much, this didn't mean that she was willing to become enemies with the most powerful woman in the military. She immediately defended herself. No, I didn't. Empress's plan had failed today, and Kunan had clearly gotten together with Sun Lang. Her plan had failed, and not only that, she had rushed over excitedly and been patted on the head by Sun Lang. She had suffered a great loss, and she was currently on the verge of exploding with rage. Why would she care about what Kunan said? She issued a very old-fashioned threat. All of you remember this. After saying this, she turned and left. The Tensei soldiers led by Ho Junji glanced at each other, unsure whether they should stay with Sun Lang or leave with their general. The situation was simply too strange. There was no need to talk about Her Highness Empress's abnormal behavior, but the arrogant Sun Lang, who had been strutting around in Tensei province 2 nights ago, had actually lost his temper and was now squatting in his carriage, muttering to himself with a dazed look in his eyes. He seemed extremely distressed, and it was hard to say what had gotten into him. It was truly bizarre. Ho Junji was overthinking things, but he knew that Sun Lang had come alone that night and tormented the entire Tensei province. His court was filled with talented civil and military officials, but they had all been beaten up by him alone. Ho Junji was no fool. Although he had been forced to fight, there was no reason for him to ask for a beating. Now that Empress was about to leave, this was perfect. He signaled with his eyes and immediately turned to follow in His Highness's footsteps. But at this moment, Sun Lang's furious roar came from behind him. You're not allowed to leave. You took my dream back. His voice was so sorrowful and indignant that it seemed like Empress really had taken away his dream. Empress cursed, "You're crazy." She mounted her horse and galloped off. Sun Lang was about to give chase, but Ho Junji, who had already turned around, revealed an extremely bitter expression. Although he wouldn't ask for a beating, he had been forced to fight. His Highness hadn't explicitly said it, but as a subject he had to bring up the rear. Thus, he turned around and charged at Sun Lang. Don't be so arrogant. His opponent was one of the most terrifying foes he had ever encountered in his life. That monstrous figure that had fought alone against so many of the valiant Tensei generals emerged in his mind, and he had to use all his strength. The true power gathered on both his arms as he abruptly cut downwards. The true chi that was like a raging inferno swept up the scorching wind and rushed forward. He had already used all of his strength for this move, but the opponent only lightly pushed his hand forward, as if he was chasing away a fly, to prevent it from blocking his path. Even though it was so casual, Ho Junji's heart turned cold. He would lose. That palm was like a saber of ice, slicing through the gust of wind and pointing at the most undetectable and fatal flaw in this move. Ho Junji did his best to change his move, but it was too late. He was at a complete disadvantage in both technique and energy. He could only watch as his opponent reached for his chest. I'll probably be sent flying, he bitterly smiled to himself. How embarrassing. He felt a strange sensation on his chest as his opponent's palm made contact with his chest. But a moment later, Ho Junji's eyes flew open in shock. He suddenly felt his blood boiling, as if all the blood in his body was rushing down. Suddenly, all kinds of scenes appeared in his mind, as if countless naked women were twisting their white bodies and dancing in his mind, stroking their hair coquettishly, and letting out charming and enchanting laughter. That was his lust, the dream he had in the past, the beautiful memories he had in the past. Now, it had already become the most enticing throbbing that tugged at his heartstrings. His breathing became rough and heavy. The desire that came from the depths of his bloodline continuously erupted. That was the call from his ancient ancestors, the purest desire of a living being to mate. Hojunji's eyes flew open in fear. He had no idea what was going on, but in a flash, a voice had leapt out of his mind, clamoring for him to explode. But the other voice of reason that belonged to him was filled with shock and fear. He didn't know what was going on, why he had become like this. In his panic, he stared at Sun Lang and couldn't help but cry out, "Aya!" But his opponent seemed even more terrified than him. A few moments later, the Shinsei High General's screams resounded through the heavens. "Aya!" Chapter 9:31. She was completely dumbfounded. Today's events were simply too bizarre for Kunan. She even suspected that her brain had shrunk as her body had shrunk, causing her intelligence to plummet. Even her ability to understand things had deviated greatly, because just a few moments ago, she couldn't understand the string of events that had taken place before her eyes. Kunan's mind was filled with 100,000 questions. Why did Empress know Li Shimin? Why did Empress feel as if he had been rubbed on the head? Why did Li Shimin seem so dejected after touching Empress? Why did the two sides suddenly start fighting? Why did that Tensei province general become so terrified after exchanging blows with Li Shimin? Why did Li Shimin also scream? Just why? What was going on? Kunan turned her head in a daze and looked at her brother. Even her brother, who had the demeanor of a general, had an extremely stunned expression. This made Kunan feel a little better. It seems like I'm not the only one who's mentally retarded. After a few moments of hesitation, she whispered, "Hey, could it be that after we left the capital for so long, a new trend has arisen in the capital? It's so strange." Kaboan pondered for a moment before saying, "The problem might be with that Li Shimin." Kunan nodded in agreement. Ever since the people from Tensei province appeared, his behavior has been extremely strange. Of course, Empress and that Hojunji's behavior is also very strange. They must know each other, Kaboan sternly asked. "Who is that person?" A strange expression appeared on Kunan's face. Before this, she glanced outside the car. Something doesn't seem right. The driver was shivering on the side, and the two siblings were the only ones in the carriage. Yes, everything had happened far too quickly. The Emperor's concubine had fled. Sun Lang had pretended to give chase, and Hojunji had immediately stopped him. The two of them had clashed, and then both of them had cried out in fear. Li Shimin clutched his head and screamed as he fled, as if he had discovered the most terrifying thing in the world. Hojunji's reaction was not much better. This illustrious general of the heavenly strategies bowed and fled, his face stricken with fear and confusion. The leaderless Tensei soldiers naturally ran with their general. Therefore, the Ku siblings were thrown onto the street. Li Shimin and the soldiers of Tensei province were nowhere to be seen. For a moment, all the hostility disappeared. Li Shimin's laughter seemed to echo in their ears, and the soldiers of Tensei province seemed to be gathered in front of them. But in the blink of an eye, everything was gone. It was like a dream, or perhaps he was hallucinating. Encountering such a situation, the Ku siblings were at a loss. In fact, even with Kaboan's steadiness and calmness, he was quite speechless. What was going on today? That mysterious Li Shimin was one thing. He had long heard that the Emperor's concubine was a heroine among women. She was not inferior to men. She dominated the Tianyuan battlefield and had the air of a great general. But looking at her previous performance, wasn't it too undignified? Kunan said weakly, "So what should we do now?" Kaboan thought for a moment and said, "Do you remember what Empress said before?" Li Shimin's appearance in our carriage gave Empress a fright. She obviously suffered a loss, and then she naturally misunderstood. Everything was really coincidental. Li Shimin happened to be in our carriage, and Empress came prepared but was caught off guard. He shook his head and said, "She's here to block us. It should be that the city gate has revealed a flaw in the end. However, it's useless to say this now. The Empress concubine already bears a grudge against us. She thinks that we set a trap with Li Shimin and made her suffer a loss," Kanan said angrily. "I don't know what happened at all." Kaboan smiled. "In the imperial capital, you can't reason. Our power and influence are too far apart from the Empress concubines. She disdains to reason with us, so that's not the main point." Kanan said thoughtfully, "We offended Empress, so we can only, yes. We have to be vigilant. Since Empress has malice in her heart, she may use sinister means in the future. We have to protect ourselves." Kaboan said, "If we want to avoid the storm, we have to find a strong and warm house. It seems that we have to find General Shansei and ask for his protection." For some reason, at this moment, when General Shansei was mentioned, Kunan suddenly had a very subtle intuition in her heart. But this feeling disappeared in a flash, making her feel confused. Kaboan noticed his sister's strange behavior and asked, "What's wrong?" Kunan frowned and said, "I always feel that. I seem to have missed something." "That Li Shimin," Kaboan comforted her. "His surname is Li, and he is familiar with Empress, and they don't get along. Maybe he's a prince. Judging from the martial arts he showed before, he can't be a nobody. We will have a chance to meet him in the future." Kunan said unhappily, "We are implicated by him." "You can't say that." Kaboan took out an ingot of silver and got off the car to give it to the coachman. The guy must be scared out of his wits. After returning, he sat on the driver's seat and took on the responsibility of the coachman. "He was invited by you, and he was very friendly from the beginning to the end." The little girl pouted and said, "Humph, you only know how to say good things about others." Kaboan flicked the whip and said, "Let's go." The stories we heard along the way were not in vain. At least we now know where General Shinsei lives. Since he has occupied the Copper Sparrow Terrace, it must be right to go there and ask to see him. What are you thinking? I always feel that something is not right. So, the gentle and steady brother and the little sister who had shrunk in size went on the road again. No matter how smart they were just simple and honest natives of the other world. Although they were experienced and knowledgeable, they could never imagine that they would pretend to be passers-by and boast about their own actions. After all, Commander of War was famous outside. He was a general of the imperial court and a martial artist of Tianyuan. He stood at the top of the world in both the field of military and the field of martial arts. Now that he had returned to the imperial capital and was playing chess with the emperor who had put away the bow after the birds were gone, what kind of spirit and power was this? The empire respected martial arts, and everyone admired the strong. So in the hearts of the Ku siblings, General Shin's image was undoubtedly a dignified and steady, heroic and powerful general who did not lose the temperament of an ambitious and ruthless person. With this inherent impression, they would never have thought that the commander of war that they had been looking for so long was actually Li Shimin himself, who had been wildly boasting about General Shinsei to them, at this moment, in the Copper Sparrow Pavilion. On the 7th floor of the Luan Feng Ming Tower, Pongji and the others stared at the tightly shut door in confusion. Not long ago, General Shinsei had rushed back like a mad dog and slammed the door heavily. Then a mysterious murmur came from inside, which vaguely said something like, "It can be recovered, it can be recovered, it can be recovered, it can be recovered, it can be thrown away, it must be like this." It was as if he had gone crazy. Then it was silent for a long time. Only the sound of footsteps back and forth indicated the drastic change in General Shin's mental activity. He seemed to be very, very troubled. The generals of Tianyuan looked at each other, wondering what was wrong with Sun Lang this time. After a while, the door was slowly opened, and Sun Lang's expressionless face poked out. With a whoosh, the generals of Tianyuan who were peeking out all shrank back. Sun Lang looked at Pongji and Shan Xiongxin with a gloomy gaze. For some reason, when faced with this gaze, everyone subconsciously tightened their chrysanthemums. General Shansei said slowly, "Pongji, stay here. Everyone else, get out." Everyone who didn't have time to run away swarmed out, leaving Pongji where he was without any sense of brotherhood. Imperial Tutor Pang's face was filled with anxiety, but he immediately bowed and said flatteringly, "Brother, what's wrong, brother?" Sun Lang beckoned him with his finger. "Come here." Pongji moved over reluctantly. "W, what are you doing? Give me your hand." Pongji felt more and more uncertain, but under Sun Lang's tyrannical power, he reluctantly extended his hand, not knowing what Sun Lang was up to. He stole a glance and found that General Shansei was staring at his hand. His eyes were changing, and his expression was conflicted, as if he was making an extremely important decision. So, what was this guy trying to do? Under Pongji's speechless gaze, General Shansei slowly extended his hand, like a cat who saw a new toy. He slowly extended his claws, and his eyes were full of vigilance and defense. A wave. He slowly waved his hand to hit, but he didn't hit, or he deliberately didn't hit. Pongji's eyes became colder and colder, as if he was looking at an idiot. A wave again. Wave again. Wave again. He missed every time, and the most recent time, he missed by a hair's breadth. Pongji couldn't understand what was going on at all. He finally lost his patience. When Sun Lang waved his hand, he hit Sun Lang right on the back of his hand and said impatiently, "What are you doing? Hitting the palm of your hand?" When Sun Lang was hit, he was so scared that he trembled and immediately jumped up, looking at Pongji with frightened eyes. Then he found that Pongji's expression was clear and his behavior was normal. Then he allowed a long sigh. "F***CK, you scare me to death," he said. Sure enough, throwing away the holy sword is normal. Pongji wondered, "What do you mean by throwing away the holy sword?" Sun Lang seemed to have thought of something and said in a low voice, "Throwing away the holy sword is fine. Then, how should I throw away the power of health? This? So what are you talking about?" Sun Lang's worry was gone, and he immediately trembled. He looked at Pongji and said proudly, "Tremble in front of me, mortal. I am now invincible." Pongji silently turned around and left. Before he reached the stairs, Fatty shouted from downstairs, "Marshal, someone is here to visit you." Sun Lang's mood became very good at this time. He stuck his head out and smiled. "Who is it?" "I'm not sure. They said they came from Sichuan and brought you a letter from old Eunuch Wei and some Miss Xie. Then, they want to meet you. Do you want to meet them?" Sun Lang was very easy to talk to at this time. He said considerately, "They worked hard to deliver the letter. It's only right to meet them. Let them come up." Chapter 9:32. Two figures, one big and one small, walked through the gate of the Copper Sparrow Terrace. The soldiers guarding the sentries along the way were all veterans of the Great War of Tianyuan. They obeyed orders and had hearts as hard as stone. But even such elites were attracted by the two people who walked in. The first thing this group of soldiers noticed was the iron tower-like figure. The military admired the strong. Anyone who saw this body would praise in their hearts that this was a good man. The person who walked in was 8 feet tall. He had a strong back and a thin waist. He looked around calmly and was imposing without being angry. His open collar revealed a bit of bronze skin. His face was as sharp as a knife, like a dignified statue. His explosive muscles were hidden under his robe, but the deep divine light in his eyes showed his strength. Without a doubt, this was a strong person who had mastered hard body skills and cultivated from the outside to the inside. He had extraordinary talent and astonishing cultivation. Just by looking at his calm demeanor and walking posture, one could tell that he was a natural military seedling. And the person walking beside this humanoid monster was an extremely beautiful little girl. This girl had the hairstyle of an adult court lady, but did not look strange at all. On the contrary, it was very suitable. Her astonishing beauty made up for the difference in age. Her ebony black hair draped over her thin shoulders and covered her delicate and smooth neck. Her skin was so delicate that it could be broken by a blow. Her pink lips were suffused with an attractive luster. As she looked around, her eyebrows were full. Her big black and white eyes were clear, like black pearls raised on a silver plate. This kind of charm this kind of beauty, even if she was just a little girl, made the hearts of the male creatures present thump. It was said that many shameful lullicons often explained their criminal motives in this way, saying that they were not lullicons and that the girl they liked just happened to be a lowly. Although it was fallacious reasoning, it could not be said to be unreasonable. For example, right now, this little girl's charm and beauty could indeed change many people's sexual preferences. A strong man like an iron tower and a charming little girl. When these two people walked together, it was like a big bear and a little white rabbit walking side by side. No matter how you looked at it, it was strange. Therefore, it attracted the attention of many people along the way. It was not surprising at all. The big bear and the little white rabbit were a pair of brother and sister. They were Koboan and Conan. Not long ago, they had experienced something as amazing as a dream on the street. Although Li Shimin and the people from Tensei province had put on an incomprehensible and strange play, they had still obtained enough useful information from their previous conversations. The former commander of war, who had changed his name to Sun Lang, had stirred up a huge storm in the capital. He had flattened the Copper Sparrow Terrace, which had a complicated network of forces behind it. Although Li Shimin's explanation had a lot of artistic embellishments, saying that the Copper Sparrow Terrace had become the headquarters of the Sky Demon and that there was decisive evidence hidden inside, these explanations could not hide the nature of General Shen's plundering. He had already taken the most profitable brothel in the capital into his pocket. Therefore, going to the Copper Sparrow Terrace to find Commander of War was definitely the right choice. The key to the problem was that the other party was the former general of the world's armed forces, and now he was also the general of the Shunsei, who had the same rank as Tensei. But Koboan was now a nobody, and Conan had been out of the system for 2 years. How could these two working people meet the big shot of the military commission? A very good idea was to use the banner and bring up their backer. After all, Conan was the eldest disciple of Wu Ho. She only needed to say that she was the eldest disciple of the former premier of the State Council. Even if it was for the sake of the respected and famous old official, the general would still meet them. But Sun Lang had returned to the imperial court with ill intentions. Conan did not want her retired master to be contaminated by the rotten smell of the imperial court, so she had to change her way of thinking. In fact, she already had a plan. That day in the West River of Qinzhou, after observing the sword chi and realizing that Commander of War could heal her internal injuries, Conan immediately went to the Bai family fort to see Wei Zhongxian. Relying on her reputation as the head of the 4 famous arresters, she also used Wu Ho's banner openly and secretly. The old eunuch's attitude immediately became amiable. The result was that she got a few letters. Old eunuch Wei and the others asked her to deliver the letters to the general after she arrived in the capital. The contents of the letters were definitely not important. The so-called delivering the letters was just an opportunity to meet Sun Lang face to face, and this was what Conan wanted. Of course, she succeeded. Conan and Koboan walked into the Copper Sparrow Terrace and walked straight and along the wide road. On both sides, there were strange flowers and fruits, shaded by plants and grotesque rocks. The elegant and quiet air of nobility was everywhere. Every decoration was original and ingenious. It was worthy of being the #1 place in the imperial capital, worthy of being the world-famous Copper Sparrow Terrace, a first-class place for pleasure. Just by looking at this kind of decoration, one could see that a lot of money had been invested in it, and also knew that it was profitable. It was like a giant beast swallowing gold, swallowing large amounts of money day and night. Conan had long heard of the name of the Copper Sparrow Terrace. She knew that many big shots in the imperial court had shares in it, and also knew that it was His Majesty's most profitable business. But now, everything here was surnamed Sunday. After stripping away the words of Li Shimin, one could understand what had happened that night. Commander of War, who had entered the imperial capital from Jinling, had launched a surprise attack. He had gathered his old subordinates in the imperial capital. Iron horses galloped, golden spears clanged, and the soldiers of Tianyuan gathered like a flood. Then he had slapped the face of a brothel. Was it small? Small, so small that it made one's hair stand on end. But was it really small? This was the largest brothel in the imperial capital. Who in the imperial court did not know that it was His Majesty's business? Those who sought pleasure in it were all important officials of the imperial capital. But General Shansei did not care. He had slapped everyone's face like crazy, and in the end, he had pulled out the most politically correct tiger skin. There was a sky demon in the Copper Sparrow Terrace. My cause was just. After stripping away the surface and looking at the source, she understood the ins and outs of the matter. She understood that Commander of War had planned every step carefully. Kunan's heart was filled with admiration. In her heart, the image of a meticulous and tyrannical person gradually filled up. His attacks were as fierce as thunder, and his schemes were poisonous to the bone. After returning to the imperial capital, his actions seemed unrestrained, but in fact, every step he took had a purpose. Every slap he gave to his opponent was hitting where it hurt the most. And now, she was about to face this legend. The commander of war of Tianyuan, who had made illustrious military achievements and brought victory and hope. General Shansei, who was now full of anger and might become the most powerful official in the last century. Her heart immediately became uneasy. When one had a favor to ask of someone, one would unconsciously lower one's posture. Moreover, the other party was in an overwhelmingly powerful position in all aspects. It was normal for her to feel uneasy. Thinking of this, Kunin looked at the person walking in front of her. His smile was very kind and fat, like a fat official who cultivated his character. But this was only on the surface. The other party's surname was In. He was the legendary bloodthirsty and man-eating Demon King, a fierce general of the Tianyuan era. War was like a furnace, melting all kinds of people into soldiers, giving all kinds of people the opportunity to become heroes. This was the way of the world. A general with illustrious military achievements might have outrageous personal virtues, but for various reasons, no one could judge his merits or demerits. Even history couldn't. History didn't have this function. A person's life was more than thousands of actions, and human nature was complex and even full of contradictions. How could a person's light and darkness be clearly described with only a few hundred words in the history books? History didn't have this function. But Commander of War's return to the capital had indeed caused many people to be restless. Android felt Kunan's gaze and turned back with a smile. "Little girl, what's wrong? What a powerful fat pig." Kunan's heart skipped a beat. She quickly put on a pitiful look and said softly, "General, is there anything I need to pay attention to when I see the commander-in-chief later? My brother and sister are used to the wild and don't know the rules. We don't want to offend the noble." Android looked at her meaningfully and grinned. "Don't be afraid, don't be afraid. The marshal is amiable and easygoing. You don't have to pay attention to anything in front of him. If you have something to say, say it. If you have something to do, do it." Seeing that Kunan seemed to be relieved, Fatty said again, "Don't worry about offending him. In fact, if you do something rude, he will kill you with one punch. What's there to worry about when you're already dead?" Enjua laughed heartily to himself. He had two bad habits. The first was telling bad jokes to people. The second was forcing people to laugh after they heard the bad joke. Of course, this method was sometimes more violent. Kunin couldn't laugh. The other party was obviously joking, but sometimes there were clues to be found in jokes. Android was General Shin's former subordinate and follower. There were three possibilities for him to joke and make fun of his superior in this kind of situation. First, Sun Lang's prestige wasn't enough, so his subordinates didn't take him seriously. This was obviously impossible. Second, Android wasn't lying. General Shansei was indeed a violent person who would kill someone if he didn't agree with him. This also didn't seem very likely. Then the third possibility, there was a saying, if the superior is good, the subordinate will be effective. There was also another saying, if the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. Only a wild and unrestrained general who liked to joke around could cultivate subordinates with the same hobby. This was a bit. Kunan was even more confused. She found that General Shint's image in her mind was blurred again. A ruthless general who planned every step, a ruthless general, a furious avenger, a madman who deceived the world, and a playboy who didn't do things properly. What kind of person was this? But this time, it was her who was going to see Sun Lang, not someone else who was going to see her. Now that the arrow was already knocked on the bow, she no longer had the leisure to continue thinking. Under Injua's lead, the two of them entered the incomparably luxurious Wanfeng Himing building and followed the long staircase all the way to the 7th floor. "Marshal, I've brought the person." Android pushed open the door, and laughter came from inside. The person inside smiled and said, "Let them in." The door was opened. The person inside and the person outside the door looked at each other. The smile suddenly froze. It was both. Kunin had seen His Highness Empress's godly skill of changing faces. After a moment, she understood General Tensei's mood at that time. General Shent's smile slowly disappeared. The next moment, he said indifferently, "Drag them out and behead them." Chapter 9:33. How to put it? Even with Miss Kunan's intelligence, she was still shocked by this change. Her mind went blank. She temporarily lost the ability to think. She didn't know what was going on at all. Unable to react, she was submerged in water and didn't know what to do. Koboen was the same. The respectful expressions on the brother and sister's faces still hadn't disappeared. A moment ago, they were filled with apprehension, because the other party was a prestigious general with outstanding achievements, an ambitious and ruthless person who stirred up the winds and clouds of the imperial court, a peerless martial artist who could travel thousands of miles with a single sword strike. No matter how you looked at it, the other party was someone they had to look up to. To meet this legendary figure and to ask for his help, even Kunan and Koboen, who were proud and confident heroes, couldn't help but feel respectful and cautious. They were prepared to pay their respects as juniors and even put the other party on the same level as the Marquis. After all, he was such a powerhouse, such a hero. When they heard the answer from inside, they felt that the voice was somewhat familiar, but at this time, the two were immersed in the apprehension and excitement of meeting the legend of Tian Yuan, so they didn't pay attention. But when the door opened and the inside and outside met, time froze. The three people, 6 eyes met, and their expressions gradually disappeared. Kunan and Koboen stood in place in shock, looking at the person sitting in the seat of honor. Kunan was lively and cute. Koboen was calm and composed. But at this moment, the brother and sister, who had different personalities and body shapes, showed the same genetic origin. The two of them showed shocked and panicked expressions at the same time. It was probably the feeling of collapse. Although they didn't make the slightest sound, that kind of lost self-control completely showed that the two of them were screaming in fear in their hearts. It at least Shimon. Now, everything suddenly became clear. A kind of holy shit, so that's how it is. No wonder Li Shimon showed an awkward expression when he heard that someone from Tensei province had come. No wonder Empress showed that kind of expression when he saw Li Shimon. At this moment, the Ku siblings and Empress Tensei understood each other. Kunin even had the impulse to cover her face and run away. Yes, although the general in front of her threw away his wig and took off his luxurious clothes, with short hair and a Western-style white robe, she confirmed with her gaze that she had met the right person. Without a doubt, the General Shunsei in front of him was Li Shimon at that time. She, Kunan, the leader of the 4 great detectives, the disciple of Marquis Wu, had returned to the capital for the first time after several years away from the capital. In the vast sea of people, she had spotted the Shunsei high general who had gone crazy for some reason. She warmly invited him into the car, chatted with him, and asked him for information. Up to that point, things were still quite normal because she was very polite and the general was also very polite. The two of them interacted harmoniously, and it could be said that both the host and the guest enjoyed themselves. It would be great if it ended just like that. After all, human nature was cheap, and some big shots were used at being high and mighty, So they wanted to experience the feeling of going deep into the grassroots and coexisting with ordinary people to make a fortune silently. This was called the white dragon suit. Just like some people who had nothing better to do in the city and felt that rural life was the best, this was called having too much time to do. The real rural life was doing farm work every day until your back was sore and your hand were calloused. Smelling the fragrance of manure and soil, you farted in the field. Did you think it was lying at the village entrance all day, fanning yourself in the sun and showing off the realm of a hermit on your WeChat moments? That was King lazy, not a farmer. It was similar to those homebodies in the city. Kunan had been a constable for a long time, so she was very clear about the mentality of those big shots who were keen on the white dragon suit. Those sluts who had too much time to spare loved to play this game. First, they hid their identity and mingled with ordinary people, and while they were at it, they ridiculed them. After they had enough fun, they suddenly revealed their identity and enjoyed the momentary sense of accomplishment of successfully showing off under the sun, especially when the peasant who called themselves brothers yesterday showed a shocked and moved expression and knelt on the ground, crying and crying, "Wow, a certain lord actually ate shit with me. I'm so touched." At this moment, the pleasure in the hearts of the incognito officials must have reached the peak. So, it would be great if this kind of plot happened. In this way, she met the General Shansei by chance and chatted happily. Later, she came to visit him and was surprised to find that he was the same person from before. Then, she, the cute little girl, showed a mixed expression of adoration and shyness. It would be best if she angrily said, "Lord, you actually lied to me." This would definitely make the other party feel a loss, touch his nose, and smile bitterly without saying anything. So, a relationship began like this. If only this was the case. It was said that this kind of trick first appeared in the storybook reviews, and then it was learned by the courtesans who were bent on getting ashore. Then, they innovated and used it flexibly. It was really successful in every endeavor, and it was unknown how many foolish and rich men were taken off their horses. But Kunan dared to bet that the courtesans who successfully went ashore did not encounter such an extreme situation. She met General Shunsei by chance and invited him to the car to chat and laugh. Both sides were very polite, and she was still disguised as a man. It was supposed to be a melodramatic opening that couldn't be any more classic. But the next moment, Mr. Li Shimin pretended to be a zealous fanboy and praised General Shunsei, which was himself with a deluge of flattery. At the time, those words were quite flattering, let alone now that the truth was out. Those fierce praises turned out to be Grandma's son selling melons. The nature of this had changed. There was no way to describe this shameless behavior without being shameless. It was too awkward. It was so awkward that Kunan, this quick-witted little lowly, was at a loss for what to do. The quick wit that she usually prided herself on was completely useless. Even if she racked her brains, she could not find a single word that could alleviate this awkward situation. Besides being a loss for what to do, her heart was also ice cold. She even wanted to run, because now that the truth was out, she felt incomparably embarrassed. And besides being embarrassed, the other side also had the option of flying into a rage out of humiliation, because with great martial arts, great power, they could do whatever they wanted. Drag him out and behead him. A sentence without any fluctuation in tone. So that's what he was thinking. After Kuboan recovered from his shock, he heard Sun Lang's words. His body suddenly collapsed, and the bones in his body emitted a light, crackling sound. In an instant, his hard body skill was completely activated. His eyes swept around, looking for the best escape route, even if the Sun Lang in front of him gave him the feeling of a boundless sea. Moreover, this was the Copper Sparrow Terrace. Other things aside, there were 4 or 5 people in the room, whose martial arts were not inferior to his. It was like a dragon's pool or a tiger's den. Escaping from here was simply a pipe dream. But he wanted to protect his family, his sister. Even if there was only a slim chance of survival, he would do his best to fight for it. But in the next moment, Kunan shouted in the most determined tone, "This humble girl, Kunan, is willing to lead the way for the general." Android, Pongji, Shan Xiongxin, and the others did not know how the brother and sister had offended Sun Lang. But since the marshal had ordered, they would drag them out and behead them. But this flower-like little girl was really a waste. As expected of the commander of war, he did not know how to have fun. It would be good to have some fun with her before beheading her. But when they heard Conan shout, they were all startled. Pongji said in surprise, "You are Conan from the 6th Fan School?" The little girl immediately replied, "Yes, this humble girl." Sun Lang looked at him. Pongji understood and ran to Sun Lang's side to whisper a few words. His meaning was that this little girl was not ordinary. She was Bao He Zi's senior sister and Wu Ho's eldest disciple. If there was no reason to behead her, then it was better not to behead her, lest she provoke an enemy. Bao He Zi was fine, but Wu Ho was not easy to deal with. Furthermore, he had already retired to the mountains, so there was no need to make things difficult for that old man. Bao He Zi's senior sister? Sun Lang looked at Conan's small figure. Did she drink the fake wine from the winery? I heard that there was a mistake in her cultivation. Pongji muttered, "How did she provoke you?" Sun Lang glared at him and said, "None of your business." "Hey, what's wrong with you today?" Pongji was very confused. After returning from the morning court, Sun Lang had been acting very strangely. He was especially moody and would lose his temper at the slightest provocation. Sun Lang looked at the brother and sister gloomily for a while, then said, "Everyone else leave." For the time being, she was spared the blade and axe, but Kunin still did not let down her guard. After all, in the secret room, within 10 steps, with General Shint's martial arts, he could smash the heads of the two of them in a matter of minutes. And he also had a very strong motive to do so. After all, if they were in each other's shoes, Kunan could understand his feelings very well. If it were her, she would definitely erase this embarrassing matter while talking and laughing. Erase it together with him. But this kind of mutual understanding was not something she would say out loud. In the face of such an ambitious and ruthless person whose temperament and methods were the best, especially when the other party was in a state of anger out of humiliation, any tricks and schemes were the path to death. Wise people would not do such things. In this kind of situation, the most important thing to do was to speak frankly. So after Android and the others closed the door and walked far away, the little lowly immediately raised both of her hands pitifully as a sign of surrender. "We will not say anything. This kind of thing does not have any benefits and will instead make you angry. If there is anything we can do to dispel the doubts in your heart, please do not hesitate to say it." Sun Lang looked at them expressionlessly. Kunan's small hands were already full of sweat, her heart thumping loudly. The difference in strength between them was too big. The other party's only concern was Wu Ho, so she could only wait for the final result. Sun Lang slowly said, "You just said you want to be my vanguard?" Kunan resolutely and decisively replied, "Of course." Sun Lang's gaze fell on the other's small and exquisite, undeveloped body, revealing a meaningful expression. In other words, "You are willing to do anything." Chapter 9:34. The door to the room was pushed open. Koboan walked out with heavy footsteps. He slowly closed the door behind him. His face was expressionless. His lips were tightly pursed, and his hands were clenched into fists. His majestic body was slightly trembling. This stalwart man's footsteps were not as firm as before, but had become erratic. His eyes were constantly changing. He seemed to want to turn around. But he resisted. He took a few steps and left the door behind him. He passed through the wide walkway and arrived in front of the guardrail. Looking down, he could see the richly ornamented rafters and painted rafters 7 levels below the Copper Sparrow Terrace. He had never been here before, but he knew that this was the best brothel in the capital. He thought that he would never come to such a place in his life, but he still came with his sister. And now, he left the room behind him, but left his weak sister there. There was another person inside, a man, a powerful man, and it was his sister who had asked to do this. Koboan's heart was in a mess. He gritted his teeth and clenched his fists tightly. All the bones in his body crackled. He was not good with words and could not describe his current mood. But he could be sure that it was not a good feeling. It was very difficult to endure. He should not have done this, but this was his sister's idea. Protecting his sister was the responsibility of an elder brother, but he could not do it. His sister had entered the demonic path while cultivating. Her body had turned back to a young girl overnight, from a peerless beauty to a little girl. He could not find a divine doctor who could bring her back to life. He could not find a peerless master with profound internal strength for his sister. He could only see his sister forcing a smile all day long, but he could not do anything. It was the same today. The man inside was the person in the world most likely to be able to heal his sister's injuries. His sister had also said that in order to recover her body and regain a complete life, she would do anything. But was this really good? Sun Lang had asked if she was willing to do anything. His sister had said yes. For a man to ask a woman if she was willing to do anything, his motive was not pure. Moreover, he had to ask the third person in the room to leave, leaving only a man and a woman in the room. Koboan knew what this meant. He clenched his teeth and breathed heavily. Anger and helplessness gnawed at his soul. He wanted to kick open the door and take his sister away, but it was impossible because he couldn't fulfill his sister's wish. He couldn't do anything, just like now. He could only wait. Confusion, pain, and heart-wrenching. What if, he asked himself, what if in the room his sister's cries or even the sound of breathing, what should he do? But he immediately realized that how to do it wasn't the main point. The question was, what did his sister want him to do? The answer to this question was so obvious that it was despairing. This is wrong, he thought. However, things in this world could not be judged simply by right or wrong. Moreover, it involved his family, which made the principles and beliefs that he usually firmly believed in lose their footing. Koboan's mind was in a mess. All kinds of thoughts came one after another in his mind. His heart was filled with anger and sorrow. He wanted to listen to the voice inside, but the room was completely silent. There wasn't even the sound of talking, not even the slightest bit of noise leaked out. Then he understood that Sun Lang had used his powerful cultivation to set up a soundproof enchantment. What was going on inside? As he thought of this, he felt a sharp pain in his heart, as if thousands of ants were gnawing at it. But he still stood there quietly, like a silent statue. After a while, he noticed something strange from the corner of his eyes. Koboan slowly looked over. It was Android and a few others. They looked over and saw him, standing there alone. At first, they were startled. Then an extremely mischievous look appeared in their eyes at the same time, their expressions meaningful. Such a look made Koboan's heart churn violently. He felt like he was about to explode. A young man waved at him, as if to ask him to go over, but was immediately stopped by his companions. "Why are you asking me to go over? Are you mocking me? Are you laughing at me?" Koboan secretly gritted his teeth. Just as he was about to move, a loud bang came from behind him. Koboan turned around abruptly and saw his sister's small body knock the door open. What entered his eyes was the weak and petite but strong back. Her back was to him, facing the room, and her body was slightly trembling. Sure enough, it still won't work. "You can't do this." A familiar voice sounded in his ears. It was the determination after hesitation, the rejection in the midst of uneasiness. Kunan's voice was trembling. "General, please conduct yourself with dignity." From these few words, Koboan had already determined what had happened. The accumulated anger in his heart exploded in an instant. He let out an inhuman roar and was about to rush into the room. But Kunan had already expected her brother's actions and had already turned around and shouted angrily. "Stop!" There was only one person's voice in the world that could calm his anger and stop his actions. Koboan stopped. "Little sister." Kunan looked deeply at her brother and said softly, "Don't act recklessly." As if she already knew that these words were enough to persuade her brother, Kunan turned back to face the person in the room. No matter what the other person's request was, she seemed to have chosen to refuse. Passing over Kunan's head, Koboan's gaze looked into the room. The figure had already slowly stood up, blocking the light coming in through the window behind him. The front of his body was shrouded in a hazy shadow, looking like a monarch in the darkness. This was a temperament that was completely opposite to the talkatively Shimon from before. Powerful, cold-blooded, arrogant, and domineering. This was the Shunsei general's original appearance. A domineering minister, a fierce general, and a peerless expert. Kuboan heard Sun Lang say, "Conduct yourself with dignity? Let's not talk about the previous matter for now. You're here to ask for my help, right? Since you're asking for help, you have to pay the price. Isn't this a matter of course?" Kunan's body trembled slightly. The general's voice was cold and calm, as if he was talking about an insignificant matter. "Your hand's minor yang's 3 scorching meridians are damaged. The eternal spring's true qi is in chaos, affecting your entire body. Your body has shrunk, and your meridians are unable to bear the original inner qi. Losing the nourishment of true qi, your meridians will inevitably wither. This is a vicious cycle. In the long run, not only will you not be able to live forever, I'm afraid it will be difficult to keep your life. You've been injured for 2 years, and your master is a martial marquis. For you to not recover after such a long time, it can be seen that your master's skills and connections are useless. In other words, I'm probably the only person in the world who can cure you." General Shunsei looked over and lightly said, "Curing your injuries is not easy. It will take some effort. For such trouble, can't you ask for a reward? Moreover, for you, this is a great kindness that will rebirth you. Such a great kindness. Don't you know how to repay it?" Kunan gritted her teeth and said, "I'm willing to give you advice," Sun Lang sneered. "Give advice and suggestions? Do I lack wise people under my command? Let's not talk about others. Pongji Yin Song and Kai Jing outside. Which one of them is below you? You're just a small constable. You want to show off your knowledge in front of Sky, Origin Commander of War? Give me advice and suggestions? Your master is more like it. You're not worthy." A merciless attack. The gap between them was too big. Kuboan looked at his sister's weak and trembling body, his eyes becoming sinister. His sister had been incomparably intelligent since she was young. Her talent was peerless. Since she was young, when had she ever received such ridicule and contempt? Sun Lang calmly said, "I'm not a charity. I have no obligation to treat your injuries. If you want me to help you, you have to give me a reward that will move my heart. If you want me to work for free, that's fine too. Call your master over and ask him to beg me. I will definitely help without a second word. Wuho's face, I will definitely take care of it. But you don't want to. I understand. You think that I, Sun Lang, have a bad reputation. You don't want your flawless master to have anything to do with me, a traitor. I also understand. After all, this is a business that is willing to fight and accept. If you don't want to do it, I won't force you. So I put forward another choice for you to consider. You don't want to ask your master to speak. It's your filial piety as a disciple. You don't want your master to put down his old face for your matters. Then, General Shin's tone did not fluctuate at all. Your own body. You can always make your own decisions, right? A fair lady is a good match for a gentleman. I'm not interested in your talent and wisdom, but your body is a little interesting. This is my exchange condition. I think it's quite worth it. Of course, it's just what I think." He looked at Kunan with a smile that was not a smile. "If you don't want to, then forget it. But regarding the matter of healing, don't mention it again. So, you just rejected me. I won't force you. I'll take the rejection as a girl's self-love and self-esteem. So I'll give you a second chance." He took a step forward, slightly bowed, leaned forward, and leaned closer to Kunan. He took a deep breath. His face was full of intoxication. He looked like a perverted lolicon. "I'll ask you again. Are you willing to offer your body to me?" Kuboan could no longer hold back. He roared, shameless, presumptuous. Sun Lang's eyes were cold. Senrin's killing intent suddenly spread. "Do you have the right to speak?" Kuboan's heart was filled with indescribable grief and indignation. The little bit of good impression he had for Li Shimin had long been thrown away. His eyes were red. He roared, "I didn't expect you to be this kind of person." Sun Lang sneered. "There are many things you can't think of. For example," he looked at Kunan again, For example, even if it's such a request, you don't know if your sister has the courage to refuse. The General of Divine Strategies revealed a calm smile. Make your decision, young lady. Do you want to walk out, or do you want to close the door? Chapter 935. Kuboin's anger froze. Sun Lang was right. He was not angry, but afraid. Even if it was such an obscene request, he did not know if his sister would agree. After all, it was the only hope to recover her body and take back her life. After all, it was his sister's obsession, his sister's inner demon. So he was afraid. He was afraid that his sister would disregard everything and choose to throw herself into the arms of the other party, agree to the other party's shameless coercion and request, and sacrifice her young body. If such a thing really happened, he felt that he would go crazy on the spot. Self-blame, fear, confusion, worry, and complex emotions surged in his heart. His lips trembled as he looked at his sister's figure and whispered, "Sister." His voice was dry and hoarse, without the usual calmness and peace. When it came to their closest relatives, no one could keep calm. Kunan turned around, and their eyes met. The girl's expression was miserable and helpless, like a trembling daffodil in the cold wind. Two pitiful people who had no choice. After looking at each other for a long time, Kunan lowered her eyes and whispered, "Sorry." These two light words were like a heavy hammer pounding on Ku Bowen's chest, causing him to feel a sharp pain in his chest. He wanted to speak, but he couldn't say a single word. His lips trembled and his eyes became moist. But in the next moment, the situation changed. "Sorry, General. I still have to reject your proposal." Flowers bloomed, birds sang, and the sun shone on the earth. Ku Bowen's eyes widened in surprise, followed by deep worry and self-blame. He knew what rejection meant. General Shunsei seemed to be very surprised as well, so much so that there was a slight fluctuation in his voice. "Reject? Do you want to live like this for the rest of your life?" Kunan smiled gently, as if she had accepted the rejection. "These past 2 years, I've been looking for hope to change back, because I want to live a complete life. From childish to mature, from young to old, the changes every day, the experiences of every life. I want that kind of life, and I don't want to stay in this state forever, living a meaningless life." Since she had given up, there was no need for her to bow and bend her knees. The young girl looked directly at the person in front of her and said quietly, "However, a life obtained at such a price is not complete in the first place. Rather than living my entire life in the shadow you left me, I'd rather live a complete life in this state. Otherwise, I'll have to think about everything you did to me every day. It's a little disgusting." The general's expression darkened. The temperature in the air dropped rapidly, and the bone-chilling breeze slowly dissipated. The joy in Ku Bowen's heart had yet to dissipate. Now, he was vigilant again. He was ready to risk his life at any time. If the other party wanted to use force, he would also risk his life. But at this time, he saw Sun Lang smile. The gloominess on his face was swept away, and General Shinsei applauded. Clap, 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 clap. His smile was very bright, just like the Li Shimin he had played before. He was friendly, sunny, and aloof, just like an immortal who had come down from the heavens, playing life, carefree. He smiled and said, "You're really amazing. Under that kind of threat and coercion, you can still keep your bottom line. You're really a good girl with self-respect. Sorry, did I scare you just now?" The atmosphere suddenly changed, and there was another big twist. The worry on Ku Bowen's face turned into surprise. "Ah, don't make that kind of expression. I'll feel very guilty." Sun Lang smiled gently. "Actually, everything just now was a small test I set for you. I just wanted to see what kind of person your temperament is and what kind of person you are. Since you've passed the test, of course I'll treat your injuries. Don't worry, of course it's unconditional, and I won't do anything excessive to you." "Ah, so it's like this. That's really great." Ku Bowen was cured. He couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief, and then revealed a smile. Just as he was about to say some words of thanks and apology, General Shin's smile suddenly disappeared. "You will do. I will. This will say. Will Sun ran eyes, and his expression was bad. His eyes were wide open, and the corner of his mouth was curled, just like a hooligan. He looked down at the short Canaan, and his tone was overbearing and cold. You dare to refuse my request. Woman, I'll remember you. It was you who came to my door to beg me, but you're not willing to pay the price. You don't know what's good for you, and you dare to mock and ridicule me. You've got guts. He fiercely said, You'll be a primary school student for the rest of your life. After this village, there won't be another shop like this. Even if you regret it in the future, even if you wear a maid outfit and wear cat ears, climb into my bed in the middle of the night and meow to beg me, I won't agree to it. Kunan almost believed him just now. She was played by Sun Lang, and she was also very angry. She coldly said, I'll never regret it. General, please continue to sleep. You can have everything in your dreams. Sun Lang Sunran said, Then why don't you get lost? Kunan calmly said, We'll take our leave. We're really grateful that you took the time to meet us today. We wish General Shansei a meteoric rise, a prosperous official road, a group of wives and concubines, and a hall full of children and grandchildren. These words were also secretly mocking Li Shimon's crazy self-praise, and could be considered a small counterattack. After saying all this, she bowed and retreated. In the end, she thought of something and added, General, please rest assured, we'll forget everything we saw and heard today, and we won't leak it out. Therefore, we won't damage your reputation. You can rest assured. These words are a bit superfluous. Sun Lang lightly said, You don't need to promise anything. If similar rumors spread outside, I'll cut your brother in front of you. Kunan took a deep breath and said, Goodbye. Sun Lang didn't reply. He turned and returned to his desk and sat down, no longer paying attention to the siblings. Kunan turned and looked at her Oni-chan. Let's go. The two figures, one big and one small, walked down the long stairs. Meaningful gazes shot from all directions. This was the most difficult path to walk, because no one could determine whether the temperamental General Shansei would go back on his words or not. If he forcefully detained the two of them, they would be powerless to resist. But perhaps because they wanted to save face, or perhaps because they were afraid of the Marquis, no one stopped them from leaving. Kunan walked in front, and Koboan protected her by her side. It was like this since childhood, and it was the same when they grew up. They walked out of the lawn Feng and Ming Lu, walked through the long walkway of the Copper Sparrow Terrace, and left the tall door. Suddenly, Koboan heard a soft sobbing sound. His heart moved, and he immediately squatted down in front of his sister. He noticed that two clear tears had climbed onto her beautiful face, and her beautiful eyes had also turned red. Koboan panicked, and subconsciously reached out to wipe her tears, but he was afraid that his hands were too rough and would hurt his sister's skin. He hurriedly looked for a handkerchief, but Kunan clenched her teeth and wiped her tears. Brother, I can't accept this. Her voice was filled with grievance and anger. Koboan's movements froze, and then he sighed, Little sister, I'm useless. Kunan continued to speak. I thought that with my eloquence and wisdom, I would be able to convince him and use my loyalty to exchange for his help. But I never thought that he would not care about my talent at all. He only cares about my body. All my life's learning and talent, in his eyes, are worthless. All my hard work can't even compare to the body that father and mother gave me. She said with a bitter smile, If I were a man, would there be no side issues like this? Koboan didn't know how to comfort her, so he racked his brains to come up with a few words. That's because he was arrogant and didn't know what was good for him. He looked down on my sister. He will definitely regret it. Regret. Kunan chewed on these two words, and her eyes slowly lit up. Her eyes flashed with unwillingness and resentment, and she forcefully nodded her head. Yes, regret. I will make him regret it. Koboan was startled. Little sister. Kunan took a deep breath. He looked down on my talent and only cared about my body. He looked down on my ability, so I will make him regret it. I will let him know what he did today and what he gave up. I will make him admit his mistake today and make him not dare to look down on me again. She reached out and grabbed her brother's big hand. and seriously said, "Yes, I will do that." Caboin looked at his little sister's stubborn and hateful eyes, and a bad feeling flashed through his heart, but he couldn't tell where the uneasiness in his heart came from. He muttered, "Little sister, let's do it," Kunan said firmly. "We are alone. Let's go find Junior Bao first." In the Luanfeng and Ming Tower, a few people watched the siblings leave in the car. Pongji smacked his lips. "What's going on?" "It looks like this little girl came to beg the marshal, and the marshal took advantage of her and forced her to do that kind of thing, but was flatly rejected." As soon as his voice fell, it caused a burst of laughter. Android laughed and patted him on the shoulder. "Do you believe it?" Pongji thought for a moment, and his serious expression couldn't be maintained. He opened his mouth and laughed happily. "Of course I don't believe it. Just based on the marshal's perverted guts?" He laughed for a while and thought. "In other words, this is all an act?" Android said, "Most likely. That's why I stopped you when you wanted to talk to Caboin." Obviously, Caboin was kept in the dark. If you told him that the marshal was a coward, he probably wouldn't be worried, and this act wouldn't fool him. In this case, not only did you ruin the marshal's big plan, but you also revealed important secrets of our army. It would be strange if the marshal didn't drown you in a cesspool. Pongji shivered. After all, he was a scholar, and he liked to think about things. After laughing for a while, he frowned and thought. In other words, this is a double act, a scheme set up by the marshal and Canaan, but it's a bit obvious. Chapter 9, 36. In the capital, Lord Bao slammed the gavel on the table and announced the verdict. The three groups of Yamen runners cheered in unison while the commoners sang their thanks. The plaintiff and the defendant had reached a consensus, and the dispute was resolved. Both sides were sincerely convinced. Bao Shiren reminded them a few more times, and the two of them left with gratitude. In the imperial capital, the official leaned back on the spacious hall chair and pinched the space between his eyebrows to slightly ease his tired mood. It was just an ordinary neighborhood fight and neighborhood dispute, but it had to be brought to court to determine who was right and who was wrong. As the capital's governor, the #1 official in the country, he had to work hard every day and deal with these trivial matters. After all, where did so many murder cases come from? Where did so many powerful officials come from to bully the weak? The capital was densely populated with all sorts of people. Most of the cases were disputes and disputes between commoners. Although it was his duty, it was really frustrating to have to do this kind of work every day. Now that there was no one in the court, Lord Bao could take a break. He had been very unhappy these past 2 days, mainly because of a certain person. That person had just returned to the capital and turned the situation upside down. First, it was his duty, and second, it was because he couldn't stand the other party's arrogant attitude. However, he couldn't do anything to the other party, so he became even angrier. In the court, there were treacherous officials and rebels, but in front of the court, there were endless trivial matters. The former was due to the lack of power. The latter was due to the unrequited ambition. Helplessness and boredom would quickly erase a hero's ambition. These days, Lord Bao had been thinking about the past. He missed the past more and more. He missed the era of the 4 great detectives. The 4 of them held up the prestige of the 6 fan school in the capital. They solved big cases and arrested criminals. Their names spread throughout the capital and shook the martial arts world. Every day was very fulfilling. Unlike now, there was nothing he could do and nothing he could change. At this moment, Gong Sun Su, who had just gone to the back of the court, quickly walked over and whispered a few words in Lord Bao's ear. The gloominess on Bao Shiren's face was swept away, and his whole person was filled with joy. He stood up and said, "Mister, quickly lead me there." While Lord Bao Shiren was handling the case, an old friend had quietly entered the manor through a side door. In the back hall of the capital office, Bao Shiren saw his eldest martial sister, whom he had not seen for a long time. Things remained the same, but people had changed, and the affairs of the world were impermanent. The grand senior sister and his memory had suddenly changed, and in one night, she had turned back into a delicate little girl. Bao Shiren saw that little figure, and for a moment, his eyes were filled with tears. He quickly stepped forward and bowed deeply. Grand Senior Sister, Kanan, dressed in snow-white robes, looked at her junior brother in front of her. He was the governor of the capital, one of the 3 assistants of the imperial capital, and an important official of the imperial court. Her junior brother, who was full of mettle and talent, now had a bright future. For a moment, she also felt a surge of emotions and said softly, "You've grown up." Bao Shiren directly squatted down and then raised his head. His eyes reflected his senior sister's figure, and his face could not hide his excitement, but his mouth joked, "Senior sister is getting younger and younger." Kanan stretched out her small hand and lightly flicked her junior brother's forehead. Among the 4 of them, although Kanan was the youngest, she was the first to enter the sect, so she was the eldest martial sister. Usually, she put on the airs of a senior sister and also considered herself as a think tank. Although everyone respected her, they also treated her as a little sister and doted on her as if she was a family member. Although they had been separated for a few years, their close relationship had not faded. With the return of his senior sister, Bao Shiren's depression in his heart was swept away, and his whole body was filled with joy. He invited her to take a seat and pour tea for her. His enthusiasm made Gongsun Su, who was beside him, speechless, and Zhang Zhao, who was guarding outside, narrowed his eyes, lowered his ears, and vigorously wagged his tail. When the 2 sides sat down, Bao Shiren asked about the recent situation. "Senior sister, did you just come?" Kunan and Ku Bowen looked at each other and forced a smile. "Yes, you can say so." Lord Bao was now dizzy with joy, and he was not as sharp and meticulous as when he was solving the case, so he did not notice the difference in his senior sister. He could guess the purpose of his senior sister's return and also knew what she was most concerned about. Although it involved a person who made him very unhappy, he had no choice but to put his senior sister first. That person was indeed the most likely person to cure his senior sister's injury. He hesitated for a moment and decided to put aside his personal grudge with Sun Lang. "Senior sister, did you come back to the capital this time for Sun Lang?" "Ah, Sun Lang is Jiang. He has changed back to his original name, and he is currently in the capital. With his martial arts, there is indeed a high chance that he can cure senior sister's internal injury." Thinking of Sun Lang's face, Bao Shiren's heart was extremely unhappy, but there was nothing he could do. He sighed in his heart, and on the surface he said without any change in expression, "This little brother can be considered to be familiar with him. If senior sister is in a hurry, I can bring you to see him right now and ask him to treat your internal injuries. Forget it, I'll just put aside my pride. At most, I'll be mocked by that fellow, and I'll just have to bear with it. Senior sister's injury is the most important thing." Just as Bao Shiren made up his mind to sacrifice his pride for his senior sister, he suddenly realized that his senior sister's eyes were red and tears were rolling in her eyes. What's going on? Are they tears of joy? Obviously not. Koboen's face was dark, and he was clenching his fists tightly. Bao Shiren's heart quivered and cried out involuntarily, "Senior sister has already seen him?" A bad feeling rose in his heart. He rejected? Why? Kunan's face revealed a distressed expression and softly said, "Yes, he rejected, because I did not agree to his conditions. So he chased us out." Bao Shiren was shocked. "Conditions? What conditions?" Kunan calmly said, "Let Master personally go and beg him." Lord Bao suddenly stood up and angrily said, "Taking advantage of people's difficulties, with ill intentions, shameless." Their master was the famous Wu Ho of the imperial court. He was a scholar, a teacher of the world. He had countless students and officials, and his prestige and achievements were outstanding. If Sun Lang really proposed such a condition, then his sinister intentions could be seen at a glance. To be able to make Wu Ho owe him a favor, even if it was just a matter of paying him a visit, it was enough to set off a huge wave in the imperial court, allowing him to obtain countless hidden benefits. Bao Shiren was so angry that he was trembling. It was not because he was angry at Sun Lang for taking advantage of the situation, but because he felt a deep sorrow. Back then, the kind and upright commander of war would not do such a thing, ignoring people who needed help, and instead thinking about the benefits involved, only thinking about profit with a heart like stone. This was something that only a despicable politician would do. He thought of what Sun Lang said that night at the Copper Sparrow Terrace, and thought of what Sun Lang did in the Imperial Temple. The person in his memory, could it be that he had really changed? At this time, Kaboan heavily snorted and angrily said, "Not only that," Kunan anxiously said, "Brother." Kaboan's face revealed an unwilling expression, but he still closed his mouth. Only the veins on his hands were bulging, and his temples were throbbing, indicating that this calm and steady man was already extremely angry. Bao Shiren asked, "Senior sister, could it be that he proposed other conditions?" Kunan's petite body slightly trembled, and she gritted her teeth. "No, no. Brother Bowen, please say it." Bao Shiren's tone became cold. Did that Sun person make some shameless request again? Ku Bowen gritted his teeth and slowly said, "He wants Junior sister to accompany him." Bao Shiren's angry face froze. The brother and sister were shocked by his reaction and looked blankly at Lord Bao, who had cried out. Bao Shiren's expression was very complicated and subtle. He blinked, suspicion and shock coexisting in his eyes. After a while, he hesitantly said, Is it like this? It doesn't make sense." Before Kunan could say anything, Kuboan snorted angrily. After experiencing what had just happened, his impression of Sun Lang had fallen into the negatives. Sun Lang had coveted his closest family member and had even attacked his closest family member. That kind of anger, that kind of fury, was something he would never forget in his life. So he looked at Bao Shiren and coldly said, "I heard it with my own ears. I saw it with my own eyes." How can it be false? You may know a person's face, but not his heart. Although this person is a meritorious general, his personal morals are really despicable. Bao Shiren's heart was still a little confused. Could it be that Sun Lang's personality had changed? All the actions and words of this person in the past came to his mind. It was hard to imagine that such a cowardly person in the past had become a pervert who forced beautiful girls to give themselves to him. He was very puzzled, but seeing Kuboan's anger and Kunan's tears, it was obvious that they were not lying. What was going on? No matter what, a rejection was a rejection. He suppressed this doubt in his heart and thought for a moment, "Senior sister, don't worry. I'll go ask that guy. No need, it's just vexing. Maybe he's just putting on an act." Kunan wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes and stubbornly said, "Anyway, these 2 years of running here and there to no avail. I've gradually given up. Actually, there's nothing bad about this. At least I don't have to put on makeup, and I don't have to worry about aging." Bao Shiren advised, "Senior sister, it's better not to give up so easily." Since he asked Master to ask him, it means that he has a lot of confidence. Otherwise, if Master asks him and he can't cure you, it's equivalent to offending Master. Although that guy is crazy, he's not stupid. He won't ask for trouble. Kunan gritted her teeth and said, "You don't have to say any more. I've already made up my mind. Even if he can cure me, he put forward such conditions. What chance do I have? Treatment requires physical contact. His lust has already been exposed. How can I let him treat my body? After he was rejected by me, he flew into a rage out of humiliation. The two of us parted on bad terms. Our mutual trust has already collapsed. How can I trust him again?" Bao Shiren was speechless. He always felt that something was not right, but he couldn't put his finger on it. "In short, I won't treat you." Kunan's tone was resolute. "He looked down on me. He insulted me. He looked down on me. Since that's the case, I'll let him see what I can do." She turned to Bao Shiren and firmly said, "Junior brother, Sun Lang has returned to the capital and stirred up a storm, throwing the imperial court into chaos. You have a loyal personality and are also the governor. You must not approve of his actions, right? Since that's the case, senior sister is willing to lend you a hand. I'll make him regret it. At the same time, in Tensei province, Her Highness Empress had returned in a sorry state. Today, she had gone to block the Ku clan siblings, but she hadn't expected that bastard Sun Lang to scheme against her. That dog thief had actually been hiding in his carriage. Truly despicable, shameless, and sinister. Wei Zheng and the others had heard the news and guessed that Her Highness's operation had not gone smoothly, but the High General had locked herself in her room and had not allowed anyone to disturb her, so no one knew what had happened. After waiting for some time, there was still no response from the room. Before Wei Zheng and Qin Xiong could see Empress, it was Ho Junji who had arrived. The old Ho had been in charge of protecting Her Highness Empress, and according to the witnesses, when Her Highness Empress had retreated, it had been the valiant old Ho who had brought up the rear. Wei Zheng and the others had been alarmed by this news and had sent men to search, but old Ho had not returned. They had believed that the venerable old Ho had fallen into enemy hands and been cruelly tortured by the evil Sun Lang. Now that he had returned safe and sound, it was truly a cause for celebration. Qin Xiong warmly went up and patted old Ho on the shoulder. "You've worked hard. Are you all right?" Old Ho had a rather strange expression on his face, and when he heard Qin Xiong's question, he shivered and shook his head. I'm fine. Wei Zheng couldn't help but narrow his eyes at Ho Junji's agitated expression. Li Jing was also suspicious and asked, "Old Ho, what happened?" Ho Junji gave a full account of what had happened. When everyone heard that Sun Lang had been hiding in the Ku clan's carriage, they all cursed him for his shamelessness. But when Li Jing heard the entire story, he frowned and muttered, "Something's not right." Wei Jing turned and asked, "What's wrong?" Li Jing silently turned to Ho Junji. Ho Junji had a guilty conscience, but he feigned confusion and asked, "What's wrong?" Li Jing smiled. "It's nothing. You've worked hard." It was clear that Sun Lang and Ku Nan were in cahoots. After all, everyone knew about Ku Nan's condition. The important thing was that Ku Nan was Wu Marquis' senior disciple, and treating his internal injuries was tantamount to obtaining a favor from Wu Marquis. This was a very serious problem. After all, given Wu Marquis' status and prestige, even a small favor would cause a massive shift in the winds of society. If Sun Lang were to take advantage of this situation, the situation would not be good. Just as everyone was worrying, a new report arrived. The Ku clan siblings dejectedly left the Copper Sparrow Pavilion, Ku Bowen angrily and Ku Nan sorrowfully. The two of them had gone to the capital office, probably to seek refuge with Bao Shiren. The Tensei officials glanced at each other in confusion. What was going on? Sun Lang couldn't treat it? Soon after, another piece of classified intelligence arrived. What's going on? Just as everyone was nervously discussing, Emperor's concubine finally opened the door and stepped out with a sullen face. "Your Highness, according to the report from the capital office, Sun Lang has made a request to Ku Nan. Either Wu Marquis personally came to beg him, or Ku Nan gave herself to him." Empress took the report, and after reading it for a few moments, a Sunran sneer appeared on his lips. "Nonsense. He doesn't have a guts. It's fake." You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.